She showed up at his gate in the middle of a thunderstorm, soaked, shaking, and running from a man powerful enough to destroy anyone who got in his way. Logan Mercer was just a horse farmer trying to raise his daughter in peace. He should have sent her away. He should have locked the gate and gone back inside. But one look at the fear in her eyes, and he knew. Turning her away wasn't something he could live with. What he didn't know was that letting her in would put everything he loved in danger. If you want to see how this story ends, stay with me until the very last word. Hit that like button right now and drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story travels. The rain had been falling since noon, but by 8 o'clock it turned vicious. Not just a storm, a full-blown assault. Wind tore across the fields in sheets, bending the old oaks along the fence line until their branches scraped the ground like fingers clawing at dirt. Lightning split the sky every few seconds, and the thunder that followed wasn't distant or rolling. It cracked hard and close, the kind that made the walls shake and the horses scream. Logan Mercer stood in the barn doorway with a flashlight in one hand and a halter in the other, his boots ankle-deep in mud. He was 32 years old, though most days he felt closer to 50. His face was lean, weathered from years of outdoor work, and he had the kind of hands that told a story without words. Scarred knuckles, calloused palms, a crooked pinky finger that never healed right after he'd caught it in a gate latch 3 winters ago. His dark hair was plastered flat to his forehead, and rainwater ran down the back of his neck into his collar, but he barely noticed. He'd been wet since 5. The barn held 6 horses, 4 rescues, 1 aging quarter horse that had been his father's, and a pregnant mare named Dutch, who'd been acting strange all afternoon. That was what had him out here. Dutch pacing her stall, refusing water, swinging her head low. He'd called Dr. Kessler an hour ago, but Kessler was stuck behind a downed tree on Route 19 and said he'd get there when he could. "Easy, girl, say," Logan murmured, stepping inside the stall. Dutch pinned her ears back and shifted away from him, her belly tight and round. He ran his hand along her flank, feeling the tension under her skin. I know you don't want me in here, but you're not doing this alone tonight." His phone buzzed in his back pocket. He pulled it out with wet fingers and glanced at the screen. A text from his neighbor, Gail Hobbs, who lived a mile up the road. "Power's out on our side. You still got yours?" He typed back one-handed. "Barely. Generator's running. Dutch is acting up. Want me to come sit with Lily?" He paused. Lily was upstairs in the farmhouse, supposedly asleep, though he doubted any 5-year-old could sleep through this racket. He'd left the hallway light on, and her bedroom door cracked open, the way she liked it. She had his old walkie-talkie on her nightstand, his idea, so she could call him in the barn if she got scared. It was a dumb system, probably, but it was theirs. "She's okay for now," he typed back. "Thanks, though." He shoved the phone away and turned his attention back to Dutch. The mare's breathing was fast and shallow, and she kept lifting her left hind leg like something was bothering her. Logan crouched down, running his hands over her legs, checking for heat or swelling. Nothing obvious. Maybe it was just the storm. Horses got spooked. It happened. But something in his gut told him tonight was different. He was still crouched by Dutch's hind leg when the dog started barking. Not the lazy, half-hearted barking they did when a raccoon crossed the yard. This was the real thing. Deep, urgent, relentless. Both of them, Rex and Dolly, going off at the same time from the front porch. Logan straightened up and looked toward the barn door. Through the rain, he could just make out the glow of the porch light, a smudge of yellow against the dark. The dogs were shadows moving back and forth across the boards. "What now?" he muttered. He grabbed the flashlight and stepped out of the stall, latching it behind him. The wind hit him full in the face as he left the barn. Cold, sharp, carrying a fine mist that felt like needles. He pulled his jacket tighter and started across the yard. The driveway ran about 200 feet from the house to the road, lined on both sides by a split-rail fence that Logan had rebuilt himself 3 years ago. At the end of the driveway stood a metal gate. Nothing fancy, just a standard farm gate with a chain latch. He kept it closed at night out of habit, more than security. There wasn't much crime out here. The town of Briarfield was the kind of place where people still left their doors unlocked and waved at strangers from their trucks. But tonight, standing at that gate in the full fury of the storm, was a woman. Logan stopped walking. He aimed the flashlight toward the gate, and the beam cut through the rain and found her. She was gripping the top rail with both hands, her hair soaked and hanging in dark ropes across her face. She wore a long coat, expensive looking, even drenched, and she had a small leather bag slung across her body. No umbrella, no car that he could see, just her, alone, standing in the rain like she'd been dropped there from the sky. The dogs were losing their minds. "Rex! Dolly! Enough!" Logan shouted. The dogs quieted slightly but kept growling, their hackles up. He walked the rest of the way to the gate, shielding his eyes against the rain. Up close, the woman looked worse than he'd expected. Her face was pale. Not just fair-skinned, but drained, the kind of white that came from exhaustion, or fear, or both. Her lips were pressed together hard, and her eyes were wide and fixed on him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. She wasn't crying, but she looked like she'd been crying recently, or like she was holding it back with everything she had. "Can I help you?" he called over the wind. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible above the storm. My car broke down. About a mile back. I saw your light from the road." Logan looked past her toward the road. Nothing. No headlights, no hazard flashers, just darkness and rain. "A mile back?" he repeated. "Maybe more. I'm not sure. I've been walking for a while." He studied her. Something about the story didn't sit right. A mile walk in this weather, in what looked like designer shoes with no phone call for a tow truck, no attempt to flag down another driver. The road wasn't heavily traveled, but it wasn't deserted either, and she didn't look like someone who'd just had car trouble. She looked like someone who'd been running. But she was also soaking wet, shaking visibly, and standing at his gate at 8:30 at night in a thunderstorm. Whatever her story was, it could wait until she wasn't in danger of hypothermia. "Hold on," he said. He unchained the gate and swung it open. "Come on, let's get you inside." She hesitated, just for a second, but he caught it. A flicker of something in her eyes, a quick calculation. Like she was weighing the risk of going inside a stranger's house against the risk of staying out in the storm. Then she nodded and stepped through the gate. They walked up the driveway without talking. The dog sniffed at her legs and wagged cautiously, apparently deciding she wasn't a threat. Logan led her up the porch steps and pushed open the front door. The farmhouse was warm inside. Not elegant, not even particularly tidy, but warm. The wood stove in the living room was still going strong, and the generator hummed steadily from the back of the house. The hallway was cluttered with boots, jackets, and a small pink backpack that belonged to Lily. A stack of horse magazines sat on the kitchen counter next to a half-eaten sleeve of crackers and a juice box. The woman stood in the doorway, dripping onto the mat, her arms wrapped around herself. In the light, Logan got his first real look at her. She was younger than he'd first guessed. Maybe 30, maybe a year or two less. Dark hair, almost black, cut just below her shoulders. High cheekbones, sharp jaw, the kind of face that would turn heads in any room. But right now it was tight with tension, her eyes darting around the space like she was cataloging exits. "I'm Logan," he said, because someone had to say something. "This is my place. My daughter's asleep upstairs, so just keep the volume down if you can." "Isabella," she said quietly, "thank you. I really am sorry about this." "Don't worry about it." He grabbed a towel from the hall closet and handed it to her. "You want coffee? Something warm?" "Coffee would be... Yes. Thank you." He went into the kitchen and put the kettle on. His coffee maker had died 2 weeks ago, and he hadn't gotten around to replacing it, so it was instant or nothing. He scooped 2 mugs worth of Folgers into cups and leaned against the counter while the water heated. From the kitchen doorway, he could see Isabella standing in the living room, pressing the towel against her hair. She'd set her bag down on the floor by the couch, a small, structured leather thing that probably cost more than his truck payment. Her coat was dripping a small lake onto the hardwood. She noticed and pulled it off quickly, folding it over the back of a chair. "There might be some dry clothes in the... Hang on." He disappeared into the back bedroom and dug through a plastic bin of old clothes. He found a flannel shirt, a pair of sweatpants with a drawstring waist, and thick wool socks. He brought them out and set them on the couch. "They're not fancy, but they're dry." "Thank you," she said again. The way she said it, careful, precise, like each word was being measured, reminded him of someone giving a deposition, too controlled, too deliberate. He pointed down the hall. Bathroom's the second door on the left. Go ahead and change. I'll have the coffee ready when you come out. She gathered the clothes and disappeared down the hall. Logan stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, listening to the storm beat against the windows. Rex patted over and pressed his nose against Logan's knee. Logan scratched behind the dog's ears absently. I know, he said to Rex. I don't know either. When Isabella came back, she looked like a different person. Not better exactly. Still exhausted, still wary, but smaller somehow. The flannel shirt hung past her wrists, and the sweatpants pooled around her feet. Without the expensive coat and the soaked hair plastered to her face, she looked almost ordinary. Almost. Logan handed her a mug of coffee. She wrapped both hands around it and took a small sip, then closed her eyes for a second. Just a second. Like she was allowing herself one moment of relief before snapping back to whatever alertness she'd been running on. They sat in the living room, him in the worn recliner by the stove, her on the edge of the couch, with her back straight and her feet flat on the floor. The fire crackled, the rain hammered, the silence between them filled up with all the questions he wasn't asking. Finally he said, So, your car? Yes. What kind? She blinked. What? What kind of car? If it's something simple, I might be able to help in the morning. I'm not a mechanic, but I can handle basics. It's a rental, a sedan. I'm not sure what happened. It just died. Battery, maybe. Or the alternator in this weather. Did the dashboard lights go out all at once, or did it kind of sputter? She stared at him. I don't remember. He nodded slowly. Okay. Another silence. She took another sip of coffee and set the mug down on the side table. Her hands were still trembling slightly. Not from the cold. The room was plenty warm. Logan had seen enough spooked horses to recognize the difference between shivering and shaking. This was the second kind. Look, he said, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I'm not going to pry. You showed up at my gate in the worst storm we've had in 3 years. You walked God knows how far in the rain, and you don't seem real eager to call a tow truck or anyone else. That's your business. But you're safe here. Whatever's going on, nobody's coming through that gate tonight without me knowing about it. So if you need to just sit here and drink bad coffee and not talk, that's fine. And if you need to talk, that's fine too. Isabella looked at him for a long time. Something shifted in her expression. Not softening, exactly, but a crack in the wall, like she'd been bracing herself against a door and someone had just told her she could step back. It's not, she started, then stopped, pressed her lips together, started again. I left someone, tonight. I got in the car and I drove, and I didn't really have a plan for where I was going. I just needed to go. Logan waited. He's not... Another pause. She seemed to be choosing words with surgical care. He's someone with a lot of influence, a lot of resources. And he doesn't handle being left very well. Is he going to come looking for you? The question hung in the air between them. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was flat, almost clinical. Eventually, yes. Is he dangerous? Not the way you're thinking. He doesn't use his fists. He doesn't have to. He has lawyers. He has contacts. He has ways of making things happen without ever getting his hands dirty. She picked up the mug again, gripping it tightly. He told me once that if I ever tried to leave, he'd make sure I had nothing. No money, no reputation, no friends. He said he'd bury me so deep in legal trouble that I'd spend the rest of my life digging out. And you left anyway. I left anyway. Logan sat back in the chair. The fire popped, sending a small shower of sparks against the screen. Outside, the wind screamed through the eaves. How long were you with him? 4 years. And in 4 years, nobody. Your family, friends, anyone. Nobody noticed what was going on. Something dark crossed her face. My parents died when I was 23. Car accident. I inherited everything. The company, the properties, the accounts. All of it. And he was there, right there, telling me he'd help me manage it. Telling me I didn't have to do it alone. By the time I realized what he was actually doing, he'd already isolated me from everyone I had left. Logan rubbed the back of his neck. He wasn't good at this. He was good at fence posts and horse feed and getting a 5-year-old to eat her vegetables. He was not good at sitting across from a woman who'd just detonated her entire life and figuring out the right thing to say. "You got a lawyer?" he asked. "I have lawyers, several, but they were his first. The firm that manages the estate, the trust attorneys, the corporate counsel. All of them answer to him in practice, even if they're technically mine." She shook her head. "I know how that sounds. It sounds complicated." "It's worse than complicated. It's designed. He spent years building a system where every exit leads back to him. Every resource I have, he has access to. Every person I might call, he's already talked to." "So you drove?" "So I drove with one bag and a rental car and no real idea what I was doing." She let out a short, humorless laugh. I don't even want to say the number. And I'm sitting in a stranger's living room in borrowed sweatpants drinking instant coffee because I couldn't think of a single other place to go." The walkie-talkie on the kitchen counter crackled. Logan held up a finger and crossed the room to pick it up. "Daddy?" Lily's voice, small and crackly through the cheap speaker. "Hey, Bug. You okay?" "The thunder's really loud. I know it is, but it's just noise, remember? It can't hurt you. Can you come up?" "Give me 5 minutes, okay? I'm just finishing something in the kitchen." "Okay. 5 minutes. 5 minutes, I promise." He set the walkie-talkie down and turned back to Isabella. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between surprise and something softer, something almost like pain. "Your daughter," she said. "Lily, she's 5. She hates storms. She sounds sweet. She's a handful." He said it the way every parent did, with complaint on the surface and something fiercer underneath. "Listen, I need to go up and check on her. The spare room's down the hall, last door on the right. It's not much, just a bed and a dresser. But it's clean. You're welcome to stay the night. I can't impose on—" "You're not imposing. It's a storm. You don't have a car. There's nowhere else to go. Stay. Get some sleep. We'll figure out the car situation in the morning." She opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to run out of fight. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you, Logan." He nodded and headed for the stairs, pausing on the second step. "Lock the front door behind me if it makes you feel better. Deadbolt and chain are both there." He didn't wait for her response. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, his wet boots leaving prints on the carpet that he'd deal with tomorrow. Lily's room was a small, crowded wonderland of pink blankets, stuffed animals, and crayon drawings taped to every available wall surface. She was sitting up in bed with her blanket pulled to her chin, her dark curls wild around her face. When she saw him, her whole body relaxed. "You're wet," she said. "I was in the barn. Is Dutch okay?" "Dutch is fine. She's just grumpy." Lily scooted over and Logan sat on the edge of her bed. The mattress creaked under him. He smelled like horse and rain and wood smoke, and her room smelled like the strawberry shampoo they'd used at bath time. "There's a lady downstairs," Lily said. Logan looked at her. "How do you know that?" "I heard you talking. I thought you were asleep." "I was pretending." He almost laughed. Almost. "Yeah, there's a lady. Her car broke down in the storm, so she's going to stay in the spare room tonight." "What's her name?" "Isabella." "Is she nice?" "I think so. I don't really know her yet." Lily considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice evaluating testimony. "Does she like horses?" "I have no idea, Bug." "You should ask her. I'll put it on the list." He tucked the blanket tighter around her and kissed the top of her head. "Close your eyes. Storm's going to pass." "Promise?" "Promise." He sat with her until her breathing evened out, which took less than 5 minutes. She'd always been like that. Fought sleep with everything she had, then dropped like a stone once she gave in. He eased off the bed carefully, avoiding the squeaky floorboard by the door, and pulled it mostly shut behind him. Downstairs, the living room was empty. The coffee mug sat on the side table where Isabella had left it, and the wet coat was still draped over the chair. He checked the front door. Deadbolt thrown, chain latched. The spare room door at the end of the hall was closed, with a thin line of light visible underneath. He stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. The house settled around him with its usual creaks and groans, louder tonight because of the wind. The generator hummed. The fire was dying down in the wood stove, and he crossed to it, opened the door, and added 2 more logs. He watched the flames catch and spread, the wood hissing where moisture met heat. Then he sat down in the recliner, pulled the old quilt off the back, and stayed there. Not because he didn't trust her, but because something she'd said had snagged in his brain and wouldn't let go. He doesn't handle being left very well. Logan had known men like that, not billionaires, not men with corporate empires and legal teams, but men who operated on the same basic principle, that other people were things to be owned, controlled, and punished when they stepped out of line. His own father, rest his miserable soul, had been a low-rent version of the same breed. Dale Mercer hadn't needed lawyers to make people's lives hell. He'd done it with whiskey and a leather belt and a voice that could strip paint off walls. Logan stretched out in the recliner and stared at the ceiling. The rain was easing slightly. Still heavy, but the violence had gone out of it. The thunder moved east, grumbling as it went. Tomorrow there'd be branches down everywhere, probably some flooding in the low field, and he'd need to check the fences and make sure none of the horses had hurt themselves in the night. Tomorrow. He'd deal with all of it tomorrow. He closed his eyes. Morning came gray and quiet, the way it always did after a bad storm. The sky was a solid sheet of low cloud, and everything outside was dripping. The eaves, the fence rails, the barn roof, the trees. The air smelled clean, almost metallic, the way it did when the atmosphere had been scrubbed raw. Logan was up at 5, same as every day. He'd slept maybe 4 hours in the recliner, which was about average. His neck was stiff and his lower back had that familiar grinding ache, but coffee and movement would fix it. They always did. He was standing at the kitchen counter in clean jeans and a thermal shirt, waiting for the kettle, when the spare room door opened. Isabella appeared in the hallway wearing the same borrowed clothes from last night, her hair pulled back in a knot. Without makeup, without the soaked-through glamour of the night before, she looked younger, tired but clearer. Like a few hours of sleep had taken the sharpest edge off whatever she'd been carrying. "Morning," Logan said. "Morning." She hovered in the doorway, visibly uncertain about whether she belonged in the kitchen. "I slept. Actually slept. I didn't expect to." Storm wore itself out around midnight. Probably helped. He held up the jar of instant coffee. "Same terrible coffee as last night. You want some?" "Please." He made 2 mugs and slid one across the counter to her. She took it and leaned against the doorframe, not quite committing to entering the room. "Your daughter," she said. "Lily, is she still sleeping?" "She'll be up in about 20 minutes. She's got an internal clock that won't quit." He took a sip. "Look, I was thinking about your car. After I feed the horses, I can drive you back to where you left it, and we can take a look. If it's dead, I know a guy in town who does towing." "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to." She stared into her mug. "I should probably just call a service. Get a ride to the nearest, I don't know, airport maybe, or a hotel. Nearest airport's 2 hours. Hotel's about 45 minutes, and it's more of a motel. Not the good kind." He set his mug down. "Where are you trying to get to?" The question seemed to stall her. She opened her mouth, closed it, and for a moment her composure slipped just enough for him to see something raw underneath. Not fear, exactly, but something close to it. Lostness. The look of someone standing at a crossroads where every direction leads into fog. "I don't know," she said. "Honestly, I don't know." Before he could respond, a sound came from the stairs. Small feet, fast and thumping, and then Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas. Purple ones, with horses on them, because of course. Her curls sticking up in 8 different directions. She stopped when she saw Isabella, stared, then looked at Logan. "That's the lady?" "That's the lady. Lily, this is Isabella. Isabella, this is Lily." But Lily studied Isabella with the kind of frank, unfiltered scrutiny that only 5-year-olds can get away with. She took in the borrowed flannel, the bare feet, the damp hair. Then she said very seriously, "Do you like horses?" Isabella blinked. Then, slowly, the corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one, the memory of what smiling used to feel like. "I do, actually. I used to ride when I was younger. We have 6 horses. Dutch is pregnant. She's going to have a baby soon." "Is she?" Daddy's worried about her, Logan cut in. Daddy's handling it. Lily, you want cereal or toast? Cereal. Can Isabella eat with us? Logan looked at Isabella. She looked back at him, and something passed between them. Not romantic, not anything close to that. Just a recognition, quiet and mutual, that this moment was teetering on an edge. She could leave. She should leave, probably. She had problems the size of mountains, and a life somewhere else, and complications he couldn't even begin to imagine. But Lily was looking at her with wide, expectant eyes, and the kitchen was warm, and the storm was over, and there was nowhere she needed to be right now except here. I'd like that, Isabella said. If it's okay. It's okay, Lily said, like it was her house and she was the one deciding, which, in a lot of ways, she was. They ate at the small kitchen table, Cheerios for Lily, toast for Logan and Isabella. Lily talked non-stop, which was normal. She told Isabella about each horse by name, described their personalities in elaborate detail, explained the difference between a canter and a gallop using her spoon as a visual aid, and asked approximately 37 follow-up questions about Isabella's riding experience. Isabella answered each one carefully, almost cautiously, like she was navigating terrain she hadn't walked in a very long time. She'd ridden English style as a teenager, she said. Dressage, mostly. Her mother had been the one who'd loved horses. My mom died too, Lily said, matter-of-factly, the way kids do when they've processed something so big, it becomes just another fact about the world, like the sky being blue. The kitchen went quiet. Logan stared at his toast. Isabella's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. I'm sorry, Isabella said softly. It's okay. I was a baby. I don't remember her. But Daddy has pictures. Lily pointed at the refrigerator, where a small photo was held up by a magnet shaped like a horseshoe. In it, a young woman with dark curly hair, the same curls Lily had, held a newborn against her chest, her face exhausted and luminous. That's her. Her name was Sarah. Isabella looked at the photo, then at Logan. He could feel her questions, the obvious ones, the ones everyone wanted to ask, but she didn't voice them. She just said, "She's beautiful." She was, Logan said. Then to Lily, "Finish your cereal, Bug. I need to get out to the barn." After breakfast, Logan pulled on his boots and jacket and headed outside. The yard was a mess. Small branches everywhere, a section of gutter hanging loose from the barn roof, standing water in the paddock. The horses were restless, but unharmed. He checked each one, running hands over legs, checking hooves, looking for cuts or swelling. They'd weathered the night fine, all except Dutch, who was still pacing her stall with that same tight, anxious energy. He was filling water buckets when he heard footsteps behind him. Isabella stood at the barn entrance, still in the borrowed flannel and sweatpants, a pair of rubber boots she must have found by the door on her feet. They were 2 sizes too big. She looked ridiculous. She also looked more grounded than she had at any point since she'd arrived. Lily told me Dutch was the pregnant one, she said. Can I see her? Logan hesitated, then he waved her over. She's in the last stall. Move slow, talk quiet. She's been edgy. Isabella walked to the stall door and looked over the top. Dutch was standing in the corner, her head low, her ears rotating between sounds. Isabella didn't try to touch her. She just stood there, hands resting on the top rail, and watched. How far along? She asked. About 11 months. Due any day now, technically. Is she okay? I think so. She's a first-time mother, so she doesn't know what's happening to her body. That makes her nervous. Nervous makes her unpredictable. I know the feeling, Isabella said, and the way she said it, dry, quiet, without looking away from the horse, made Logan almost smile. They stood there for a few minutes, not talking. The barn smelled like hay and damp earth and horse sweat, and somewhere in the rafters pigeons were cooing. It was the most peaceful Logan had felt since the storm began. I should go find my car, Isabella said finally. I'll drive you. Let me just finish up here. He finished the feeding, checked the fences from inside the paddock, one section down in the back corner, but it could wait, and pulled the truck around to the front of the house. Isabella climbed in on the passenger side, her leather bag on her lap. They drove down the gravel drive and turned onto the county road. The pavement was littered with debris. Branches, leaves, a broken mailbox from someone's yard. Logan drove slowly, scanning both sides of the road. "How far did you say?" he asked. "A mile, maybe 2. It was hard to tell in the dark." They drove 2 miles, then 3, then 5. No car. "I swear it was on this road," she said, her voice tightening. "Could you have turned off somewhere? There's a fork about a half-mile back." "I don't... Maybe. I was just driving. I wasn't paying attention to the roads." They tried the fork. Nothing. Logan pulled the truck over to the shoulder and killed the engine. "Okay," he said. "Let's think about this. You said it was a rental?" "Yes, through an app. I don't remember which one." She pulled out her phone. Dead. She stared at the blank screen like it had personally betrayed her. "We can charge that back at the house. Pull up the rental details, figure out where you left it." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "What if he tracked the rental?" Logan looked at her. "What do you mean?" "Victor. The man He has access to my accounts, my credit cards, my bank statements, everything. If I rented a car with any card he can see, he'd know the rental company, the vehicle, the GPS. He could have had it towed. Or just found it." The name landed heavy. Victor. Not a boyfriend, not an ex. A name, she said, the way people say the name of a disease they've been diagnosed with. "You think he already tracked you here?" "I don't know. I used a card I didn't think he knew about. But with Victor, you never know what he knows. That's part of how he works. He keeps you guessing so you never feel safe." Logan drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. "All right, let's go back to the house, charge your phone, figure out the car. One thing at a time." "You keep saying that, one thing at a time. Because it works. You try to solve everything at once, you end up solving nothing." She turned her head and looked at him. Really looked. Not the quick, evaluating glances she'd been giving since last night, but a long, searching look, like she was trying to see past his face to whatever was behind it. "You're very calm about all this," she said. "I've got a 5-year-old, 6 horses, a farm that's falling apart, and a dead wife. Calm is the only speed I've got left." He said it without self-pity, without drama. Just fact. The way you'd say the truck needs new tires or the well pump is acting up. It was the truth. After Sarah died, but suddenly, stupidly, a blood clot that no one saw coming 6 months after Lily was born, Logan had gone through every stage of grief at high velocity and come out the other side with a numbness that eventually became steadiness. Not peace, not acceptance, just the ability to keep moving. Isabella was quiet on the drive back. When they pulled into the driveway, she finally spoke. "I don't want to bring trouble to your door, Logan. If there's any chance he's tracking the car, any chance at all, then me being here puts you and your daughter at risk." "Noted. I'm serious." "So am I." He parked the truck and turned off the engine. "You can leave if you want. I won't stop you. But where would you go? You've got no car, a dead phone, and by your own account, a man who's monitoring your every move. Running blind into that is worse than staying put and making a plan. You don't know what Victor is capable of. I know what standing in a thunderstorm alone is capable of. You almost got hypothermia last night, one problem at a time." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she let out a breath. Shaky, ragged, the kind of exhale that carried weight, and nodded. They went inside. Lily had turned on the TV and was watching a cartoon about a horse that could talk, which she found hilarious and Logan found unsettling. Isabella plugged her phone into the charger in the kitchen and sat at the table while it powered up. When the screen came to life, she had 47 missed calls, all from the same number. She didn't show Logan the screen, but he saw her face change. The color drained out of it, and her jaw set hard, and she pressed the phone flat against the table like she was trying to push it through the wood. 47, she said. Not to Logan, to herself. To the room. To whatever part of her had hoped, maybe, that she was overreacting. "Don't answer," Logan said from the living room doorway. "I wasn't going to." "Good." She scrolled through the calls, then opened her messages. Logan watched her read, saw the way her expression moved through a progression he recognized from the horses, from Lily, from his own reflection in the bathroom mirror on the worst mornings. Fear, then anger, Then the terrible flatness that comes when you realize the thing you're afraid of is exactly as bad as you thought it was. He knows the car is gone, she said. He reported it stolen, to the police. Your rental? My rental. He told them I stole it from his property, that I'm unstable, that I need psychiatric help. Her voice cracked, just slightly, on the last word. She pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose. This is what he does. He rewrites the story. He makes himself the victim and me the threat. And people believe him because he's Victor Ashcroft. Because he shakes hands with senators and gives money to hospitals and sits on boards of directors. Because he looks like exactly the kind of man you'd trust. Victor Ashcroft, Logan repeated. He didn't know the name, but the type was familiar enough. You won't have heard of him unless you follow finance or politics. He runs Ashcroft Holdings, private equity, defense contracts, media investments. He owns pieces of things most people don't even know can be owned. Logan leaned against the doorframe and crossed his arms. And you were with him for 4 years. I was with him because he made it impossible to be anywhere else. At first I thought he was helping me. After my parents died, I was drowning. I didn't know how to run a company. I didn't know how to manage the estate. And Victor was kind. He was attentive. He made me feel like I was safe. She paused. That's the part people don't understand. It doesn't start with control. It starts with comfort. It starts with someone telling you they'll handle everything, and you're so tired and so scared that you let them. Lily wandered into the kitchen with an empty juice box. Can I have more juice? Check the fridge, Logan said. Lily opened the fridge, grabbed a juice box, and looked at Isabella. Are you sad? She asked. Isabella blinked. Why do you ask? Your eyes look sad. Logan opened his mouth to redirect, but Isabella beat him to it. I'm a little sad, she said, but I'm okay. Sometimes grown-ups have hard days. Lily nodded sagely. Daddy has hard days too. He goes to the barn when he's sad. You could go to the barn. Maybe I will. You should pet Rosie. She's the nice one. Dutch bites. Lily, Logan said, Dutch doesn't bite. She tried to bite me last week. She was reaching for the apple in your hand. That's not biting, that's eating. Lily gave him a look that suggested she found this distinction irrelevant, then wandered back to the living room with her juice. Isabella watched her go. That same expression from last night, the crack in the wall, the flash of something raw, passed across her face. She's remarkable, she said. She's opinionated. That's what makes her remarkable. Logan pulled out a chair and sat down across from Isabella. Okay, cards on the table. This guy reported the car stolen, which means there might be a police report with your name on it. That's a problem. You need a lawyer, a real one, not one of his. Someone who's never heard of Victor Ashcroft and doesn't care who he is. I know, but finding someone like that, someone I can trust, someone who isn't already connected to him somehow, it takes time. And money I can access without him seeing the transaction. You're a billionaire and you can't access your own money? I'm a billionaire on paper. In practice, almost everything runs through accounts and structures he set up. He's a co-signer, an authorized party, or a trustee on nearly everything. The prenup, she stopped. There wasn't a prenup. We weren't married, but he structured our financial relationship like one. Worse than one. He made sure that if I ever left, untangling my assets from his would take years. So you're rich and broke at the same time. Essentially. She almost smiled. Almost. I have some money he doesn't know about. A personal account at a small bank my mother used. It's not much relative to the rest. But it's mine. It's how I paid for the rental. How much is not much? About $300,000. Logan stared at her. $300,000. I told you. Relative to the rest, I know what you said, but in this house, $300,000 is not much. $300,000 is a new barn roof, a college fund, and enough left over to fix the well pump that's been making noises since February. She had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... Forget it. He waved it off. Point is, you have resources. Limited, but real. First step is a lawyer. I don't know anyone in that world, but Gail, My neighbor, her son is a paralegal in Pittsburgh. He might be able to point you somewhere." "You do that?" "I'm already doing it. You're sitting in my kitchen." The phone on the table buzzed. Another call from the same number. They both looked at it. Neither moved. It rang 6 times, then stopped. "He'll keep calling," Isabella said. "Let him. Calling's all he can do right now." "You don't know that?" "I know he's not here, and that's enough for today." She looked down at the phone, then up at him. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. You have a daughter to think about." The Logan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When I was 12, my mother packed a bag in the middle of the night and walked out the front door. She didn't have a car. She didn't have money. She didn't have anywhere to go. She just walked down the road in the dark because staying in that house one more night was worse than not knowing where she'd end up." He paused. "She made it about half a mile before my father caught up to her in the truck and brought her back. And nobody, not the neighbors, not the church, not a single person in that town, did a damn thing about it." The kitchen was very quiet. "She died 4 years later," he said. "Heart failure, technically. But I know what killed her. Living with a man who made her feel like she had no way out. That's what killed her." Isabella didn't say anything. She didn't need to. "So when I saw you standing at my gate last night," Logan continued, "I didn't see a billionaire or a stranger or a complication. I saw someone who walked out the door because staying was worse. And I thought about my mother standing on that road in the dark, and I thought about the fact that nobody opened their gate for her. Nobody let her in." He stood up and pushed the chair in. "So that's why. It's not complicated. It's not noble. It's just, I know what it looks like when someone needs a door to be open, and mine was." He left the kitchen before the moment could become something heavier than either of them was ready to carry. He went to the barn because Lily was right. That's where he went when the world got too loud. He checked on Dutch, who was finally drinking water and eating hay, which was a good sign. He mucked stalls. He fixed a loose board on the feed room wall. He did the things that kept the world turning because that was all he'd ever known how to do. Around noon, he came back inside to find Isabella sitting on the living room floor with Lily, a spread of crayons and construction paper between them. Lily was explaining, in painstaking detail, the proper way to draw a horse. Isabella was following instructions with the focused attention of someone who'd once managed corporate boardrooms but was now discovering that a 5-year-old's art direction was considerably more demanding. "The legs are too short," Lily said critically. "I thought they looked fine." "Horses have long legs. That's the whole point." "What's the point of long legs?" "Running and being tall and looking cool." Isabella erased the legs and tried again. Logan stood in the hallway, unseen, watching them. Something turned over in his chest. Not warmth, exactly. Not yet. More like the feeling of a key testing a lock, the sense that something might fit, even though you weren't looking for it and you weren't sure you wanted it to. He shook it off, went to the kitchen, made lunch, grilled cheese and canned tomato soup because that was Wednesday, and Wednesdays were grilled cheese days in this house. Isabella ate with them, and Lily talked through the entire meal, and for 45 minutes the kitchen sounded like something it hadn't sounded like in a long time. It sounded like a family. After lunch, Logan called Gail and got her son's number. He passed it to Isabella, who went into the spare room and closed the door. She was in there for over an hour. When she came out, her eyes were red, but her jaw was set. "He's putting me in touch with a firm in Philadelphia," she said. "They specialize in financial abuse and asset recovery. They've never worked with Ashcroft Holdings." "That's good." "They want to meet in person, but not yet. They said to stay where I am for a few days, don't use any devices connected to my main accounts, and don't engage with Victor directly. They need time to research the situation before we make any moves." "So you're staying?" She looked at him. He looked at her. "If that's okay," she said. "It's okay." That night, after Lily was in bed, Logan sat on the porch in the dark. The sky had cleared and the stars were out, thick and bright the way they only got in places where the nearest streetlight was 2 miles away. The air was cool and clean, still carrying the faint mineral smell of the storm. Rex lay at his feet, chin on his paws. Isabella came out and sat in the other chair, the one Sarah used to sit in, though he tried not to think about that. She had a mug of tea that she'd made herself, having figured out the kitchen well enough to locate the kettle and the box of chamomile that had been in the cupboard since approximately forever. They sat without talking for a while. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need filling, the kind that exists between two people who've said enough for one day and know there'll be more to say tomorrow. Finally, Isabella said, "I keep waiting for the fear to come back. It's been there for so long, this constant buzzing in my chest, like something's about to go wrong, and right now it's just quiet." "That's the farm," Logan said. "It does that." "Does it do that for you?" He thought about it. "Sometimes. Mostly it just keeps me busy enough that I don't notice the noise." "That's not the same thing." "No," he admitted. "It's not." Another silence. A barn owl called from somewhere in the tree line, a long, hollow note that hung in the air and dissolved. "Thank you," she said. "For today, for everything. I know I keep saying it, but I mean it." "I know you do." "I don't know what happens next, with Victor, with the lawyers, with any of it. But today was the first day in 4 years that I felt like I could breathe, and I don't want to forget that." Logan looked out at the dark fields, at the shapes of the horses standing quiet in the pasture, at the silhouette of the barn against the sky. This was his world. Small, imperfect, held together with baling wire and stubbornness. It wasn't the kind of place that usually mattered to people like Isabella Sterling, but tonight it mattered. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be long. There's fences to fix, a horse to watch, and apparently you need to learn how to draw legs." She laughed. A real one this time. Short, surprised, slightly ragged at the edges. But real. "Good night, Logan." "Good night." She went inside. He stayed on the porch a while longer, listening to the night settle around him. Rex snored softly. The stars turned overhead, indifferent and constant. Somewhere out there, a man named Victor Ashcroft was making phone calls, pulling strings, deploying the machinery of power that had kept Isabella trapped for 4 years. Logan didn't know what that machinery looked like or how it worked. He didn't know the first thing about private equity or defense contracts or legal structures designed to cage people. But he knew how to fix a fence. He knew how to keep a fire going through the night. He knew how to stand in a doorway and not move. And right now, that was going to have to be enough. 3 days passed and Isabella didn't leave. It wasn't a decision anyone announced. There was no conversation where Logan sat her down and said, "Stay," or where she looked him in the eye and said, "I'm not going." It just happened the way most important things happen, gradually, without ceremony, one ordinary moment stacking on top of another until the temporary arrangement stopped feeling temporary. On the first morning, she helped with the horses. Logan hadn't asked her to. He'd come out of the house at 5:15 with his coffee and found her already in the barn, standing outside Dutch's stall in those oversized rubber boots, watching the mare eat. She turned when she heard him and said, almost apologetically, "I couldn't sleep. I figured I might as well be useful." "You know anything about mucking stalls?" "I know the theory. Theory's about to meet practice. Pitchforks on the wall." She was terrible at it. She held the pitchfork wrong, moved too fast, startled one of the geldings so badly he kicked the stall wall and dented the wood. But she didn't quit, and she didn't complain, and by the time they finished the last stall, she was sweating through the borrowed flannel and breathing hard and looking more alive than she had since she'd stumbled through his gate. "You'll be sore tomorrow," Logan said, leaning the pitchfork against the wall. "I'm sore now." "That means you did it right." On the second day, Dr. Kessler finally made it out to check on Dutch. He was a big man in his 60s with a white beard and permanently dirty fingernails, and the kind of calm, matter-of-fact manner that made nervous horses trust him instantly. He examined Dutch for 20 minutes, running his hands over her belly, checking her temperature, listening to the foal's heartbeat with a stethoscope pressed against her flank. "She's close," he told Logan, both of them standing outside the stall while Isabella watched from the barn doorway. "Could be tonight, could be next week. First-timers are unpredictable, but the foal's positioned well and her vitals look good." "Anything I should watch for?" "The usual, waxing on the teats, restlessness, lying down and getting up repeatedly. If she starts sweating on her neck and flanks, that's usually within the hour. Call me when it starts, but honestly, Logan, she'll probably handle it fine on her own. Horses have been doing this longer than we've been watching." After Kessler left, Isabella came into the barn and stood next to Logan at Dutch's stall. "She seems calmer today," she said. "She is. Storm's over. Animals know when the pressure changes." He paused. "People too, I guess." Isabella didn't respond to that. She just reached over the stall door and held her hand out, palm down, the way Logan had shown her. Dutch sniffed it, blew warm air across her fingers, and then, slowly, cautiously, pressed her muzzle against Isabella's palm. "She likes you," Logan said, surprised enough that it showed. "She's just curious." "No, Dutch doesn't do that. She barely tolerates me, and I've had her for 2 years. She's deciding you're safe." Isabella kept her hand steady, letting the mare push against it. "Maybe she knows what it's like," she said quietly, "being somewhere new and not knowing if it's okay to trust." On the third morning, Lily declared at breakfast that Isabella was now officially part of the morning routine. "She does the hay and I do the water and Daddy does everything else," Lily explained to Rex, who was sitting under the table waiting for dropped Cheerios. "That's how it works now." "Is that right?" Logan said, pouring coffee. "That's right." Lily turned to Isabella. "Also, you need new boots. Those ones are too big and you walk like a duck." "Lily," Logan said. "What?" "She does." Isabella looked down at the rubber boots, which were indeed comically oversized. "She's not wrong," she said. "I'll take you into town later," Logan offered. "Get you some boots that fit, and whatever else you need. You can't keep wearing my clothes forever." The words hung in the air a beat too long. Isabella smoothed the front of the flannel shirt, his shirt, the one she'd been wearing for 3 days now, and something flickered across her face. Logan turned back to the counter, suddenly very interested in the coffee maker he still hadn't replaced. The drive into Briarfield took about 15 minutes on winding back roads that cut through farmland and forest. It was the kind of town that existed primarily as a dot on the map between larger dots. A main street with a hardware store, a diner, a post office, and a small general store called Craven's that sold everything from feed grain to winter coats. Population 1,200, give or take, depending on who'd moved away for college and who'd come back with a baby. Logan parked in front of Craven's and they went inside. Ed Craven, who'd been running the place since before Logan was born, looked up from behind the counter and nodded. "Logan, heard the storm took down part of your fence." "Back pasture. I'll get to it this week." Ed's eyes moved to Isabella, standing slightly behind Logan, and stayed there. Not rude, just the frank, open curiosity of a man who lived in a town where a new face was genuine news. "Who's this?" "A friend," Logan said, in a tone that didn't invite follow-up questions. "Well, welcome to Briarfield," Ed said to Isabella. "Whatever you need, it's probably here somewhere. If it's not, I can order it, and it'll be here Tuesday." Isabella found boots, actual work boots, brown leather, her size. She also picked up jeans, a couple of simple shirts, underwear, and a heavy canvas jacket. She paid with a card from the small bank her mother had used, the one Victor didn't know about. Her hand shook slightly when she swiped it, and Logan saw her glance at the door like she expected someone to walk in and challenge the transaction. "It went through," Ed said cheerfully. "You're all set." In the truck on the way home, Isabella sat with the shopping bags on her lap and stared out the window at the green hills rolling past. "I haven't bought my own clothes in 4 years," she said. Logan glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "Victor picked everything, what I wore, where I bought it, which designers. He said it was about image, that people at our level had to present a certain way. I had a closet full of $10,000 dresses, and I hadn't chosen a single one. That's not about image. That's about control. I know that now. I knew it then too, honestly. But when you're inside it, when it's happening every day, you find ways to explain it to yourself. You tell yourself it's just clothes, it's just a preference. He's just particular. You shrink the thing down until it fits inside a box you can carry." She turned away from the window and looked at him. "And then one day the box gets too heavy. What was the last thing, the thing that made you leave?" She was quiet for a long moment. The truck bounced over a pothole, and the bags rustled on her lap. "He made a phone call," she said. 3 weeks ago. I overheard it. He was talking to someone, I don't know who, about transferring the remaining shares of my parents' company into a new holding structure, one that I wasn't a part of. He was taking the last piece of them I had left, and he was doing it on a Wednesday afternoon like it was a lunch order. Her voice was steady, but her hands had gone tight in her lap, knuckles white. My mother built that company from nothing. She started it in a rented office above a dry cleaner when she was 26 years old, and he was just erasing her, erasing them, like they never mattered. What did you do? I stood in the hallway for about 10 minutes, just standing there, and then I went upstairs and packed a bag. One bag. I walked past his office door and I could hear him still on the call, laughing about something. He didn't even notice me leave. They pulled into the driveway and Logan parked the truck. Neither of them moved for a moment. "The lawyer's in Philadelphia," he said. "They can stop the transfer?" "They think so, but it's going to be a fight. Victor's attorneys have been laying the groundwork for months. There's a paper trail designed to make it look like the restructuring was my idea. Documents I supposedly signed. Meeting minutes from meetings I never attended. Forgery? Or manipulation. He'd hand me a stack of papers and say, 'Sign these, it's routine.' And I'd sign because I trusted him, or because I was too tired to read 80 pages of legal language, or because questioning him always led to a conversation I didn't want to have." "What kind of conversation?" She opened the truck door and stepped out, grabbing the bags. "The kind where he explained very calmly and very logically all the reasons I was wrong to doubt him. He never yelled, he never threatened. He just talked and talked until I felt like I was losing my mind, until I couldn't tell if I was being reasonable or paranoid. He'd say things like, 'Isabella, I'm worried about you. This kind of suspicion isn't healthy. Maybe you should talk to someone.' And then he'd hand me the name of a therapist he'd already vetted, someone who would tell me exactly what he wanted me to hear." Logan got out of the truck and closed the door. "So he used mental health against you?" "He weaponized everything. My grief, my loneliness, my inexperience. Every vulnerability I showed him, he filed away and used later. That's what people like Victor do. They don't attack from the outside. They get inside first, and then they start rearranging the furniture until you don't recognize your own house." They went inside. Lily was at the kitchen table with a stack of construction paper, drawing what appeared to be a horse with wings. "That's Rosie," she announced. "But if she could fly—" "Beautiful," Isabella said, pausing to look. "The wings are perfect." "I know." Lily held up the drawing. "Can you put it on the fridge?" Isabella looked at Logan. He shrugged. She took the drawing, found a magnet, and stuck it to the refrigerator door, right next to the photo of Sarah holding newborn Lily. For a second, all three of them looked at the fridge. The old photo, the new drawing, side by side. Nobody said anything about it. That afternoon, while Lily napped, Isabella sat on the porch with her phone and made calls. Logan could hear fragments through the screen door as he worked on the porch railing that had been loose since last summer. "I understand the timeline. Yes, I have documentation. No, I will not be contacting him directly. I understand the risks." Her voice was different on those calls. Harder, more precise. The voice of someone who'd spent years in boardrooms, even if she'd been a hostage in them. Logan recognized the shift. It was the same thing he did when he talked to the bank about the farm's mortgage. The way you pulled on a version of yourself that could handle the machinery of the world, even when the real you was exhausted and scared. When she came back outside, she sat down on the top step and pulled her knees to her chest. "The law firm wants me to compile a timeline," she said. "Every significant event, every financial transaction, every conversation I can remember where Victor exerted control or made threats. They need it documented before they can file anything." "That sounds like a lot." "It's 4 years of my life reduced to evidence." She rested her chin on her knees. "You know the strangest part? Some of it I can't remember clearly. Not because it wasn't bad enough to remember, but because he made everything feel so normal. The control was so gradual, so constant, that it became the background noise of my life. I can't always tell where normal ended and the abuse started." "That's not strange. That's how it works." She looked at him. "Your mother?" "Yeah." "Did she ever talk about it? After?" "There was no after. She never left. She died in that house." He hammered a nail into the railing, maybe harder than necessary. "My father told everyone she had a weak heart, natural causes, and people believed him because it was easier than asking questions." "And you?" "I was 16 when she died. I left 3 days after the funeral, hitchhiked to Pittsburgh, got a job washing dishes, slept in my car for 6 months. Never went back. How did you end up here on this farm? He set the hammer down and wiped his hands on his jeans. Sarah's parents owned it. When they passed, they left it to her. She always wanted to live out here, fix it up, rescue horses, raise kids. The whole picture. We had about 18 months of that before she died. He paused. And then it was just me and a baby and a farm I didn't know how to run and a grief I didn't know how to carry. So I just started working every day, sun up to sundown, and eventually the farm became something, and Lily grew up, and the grief didn't go away, but it got quieter. Isabella was watching him with that expression he'd seen a few times now. Not pity, not sympathy exactly, but recognition. The look of someone who understood what it meant to keep moving when standing still would break you. "We're a pair, aren't we?" she said. "I guess we are." Later that evening, after dinner, spaghetti with jarred sauce because Logan's cooking range was limited and he'd accepted that about himself years ago. Lily insisted on showing Isabella the horses one more time before bed. They walked to the barn together, all three of them plus Rex, the last light fading from the sky in bands of orange and purple. Lily led Isabella from stall to stall, introducing each horse with the seriousness of a diplomat presenting foreign dignitaries. "This is Rosie, she's the nicest. This is Captain, he's old, but he's brave. This is Pepper, she's grumpy, but she doesn't mean it. This is Biscuit, he's scared of plastic bags." Plastic bags? They crinkle. He hates crinkling. Isabella crouched down to Lily's height. "I think Biscuit and I have something in common." "You're scared of plastic bags?" "No, but I'm scared of loud noises sometimes." Lily considered this. "Like thunder?" "Something like that." When they got to Dutch's stall, Lily pressed her face between the bars and whispered, "She's going to have her baby soon. Daddy says it could be any day." "Are you excited?" "So excited. I want to name it Sparkle." "That's a strong choice." "Daddy says I can't name a horse Sparkle." "What does Daddy want to name it?" "Something boring, probably. He wanted to name Rex Buddy. Can you imagine? Buddy." From behind them, Logan said, "Buddy is a perfectly good name." Lily rolled her eyes with the full dramatic power of a 5-year-old who has heard this argument before and considers it settled. Isabella covered her mouth with her hand, but the laugh escaped anyway, small, surprised, real. Like the one on the porch that first night, but warmer this time, less careful. After Lily went to bed, a process that involved 2 stories, a glass of water, a debate about whether stuffed animals could dream, and a final negotiation over leaving the hall light on versus the night light, Logan came back downstairs to find Isabella at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. "The timeline?" he asked. She nodded. The pad was still mostly blank. She'd written a date at the top and one line underneath it, but the pen was just hovering over the paper, not moving. "I keep starting and stopping," she said. "Every time I write something down, I hear his voice telling me I'm exaggerating, that it wasn't that bad, that I'm being dramatic." "That's his voice, not yours." "I know, but it's been in my head for 4 years. It sounds like mine now." Logan sat down across from her. "Then start with facts. Not feelings, not interpretations. Just what happened. Date, what he did, who was there. Keep it simple." "Simple. Write it like you'd tell it to a stranger who doesn't know either of you. No excuses, no explanations, no but he was stressed, or but I should have known. Just what happened." She stared at the pad for a long moment. Then she put the pen to paper. "September 14th, 2021, she read aloud as she wrote. 2 months after my parents' funeral, Victor Ashcroft offered to manage the estate transition. I agreed because I was grieving and overwhelmed. He presented documents transferring advisory authority over the Sterling Family Trust to a joint oversight committee. I signed without reading the full terms. The committee consisted of Victor and 2 of his personal attorneys. She looked up at Logan. That's when it started, right there. 2 months after the worst day of my life, and I signed away the keys. Keep going. She kept going. For over 2 hours, she wrote. Slowly at first, each entry dragged out of her like pulling a nail from old wood, but then faster, the entries getting longer, more detailed, the pen moving with a kind of desperate momentum. Logan sat with her for the first hour, then got up to tend the fire and check on Dutch. When he came back, Isabella had filled 8 pages. October 2022, she was reading aloud, her voice flat and steady. Victor informed me that my personal assistant, Claire, had been terminated. He said she was stealing. I later learned that Claire had been asking questions about irregularities in my financial statements. She was the 3rd person Victor removed from my life that year. The 3rd? My college roommate, who told me she thought Victor was isolating me, gone. My financial advisor, the one my father had used for 20 years, who raised concerns about the trust restructuring, replaced. And Claire. She set the pen down and flexed her cramped fingers. He never did it himself. It was always for your protection, or they weren't trustworthy, or I had to make a difficult decision. And I believed him, every time, because by then, he was the only voice I heard. Logan poured 2 mugs of chamomile tea, the only thing left in the cupboard besides instant coffee, and set one in front of her. My mother had a friend, he said, sitting back down. Margaret Holt. Lived about 3 miles from us. She was the only person who ever told my mother the truth about my father. And one day Margaret stopped coming around. My father told my mother that Margaret had been spreading lies about their family, that she wasn't a real friend. My mother believed him because she wanted to, because the alternative was admitting that the man she'd married was the lie. Isabella wrapped her hands around the mug. Victor told me once that isolation is a gift. He said it that way. I'm giving you the gift of clarity. When you only have one person to trust, you never have to wonder who's on your side. And I sat there and nodded, and part of me even felt grateful. That's not weakness. Then what is it? Survival. You did what you had to do to get through each day, and then when you couldn't do it anymore, you left. You're here. That matters more than the years you stayed. She looked at him over the rim of the mug, and something passed between them. Not quite gratitude, not quite affection. Something rawer than both. The acknowledgement that they were 2 people who'd been shaped by damage and were still, somehow, standing. You should get some sleep, he said. You can work on the timeline tomorrow. There's more. A lot more. I know. But you don't have to bleed it all out in one night. She stood up, gathering the legal pad against her chest like armor. At the kitchen doorway, she paused. Logan. Yeah. The things you told me about your mother. You didn't have to share that. I know. Why did you? He considered the question. Because you needed to know that someone understands. Not the specifics. My mother's life and yours aren't the same, but the shape of it. The way it bends you. That part, I understand. And knowing someone understands, it helps. At least it helped me, the few times anyone bothered. She stood there another moment, the legal pad pressed against her chest, the borrowed flannel hanging off her shoulders. Then she nodded once, turned, and walked down the hall to the spare room. The door closed softly. Logan sat alone in the kitchen. The house ticked and settled around him. The fire was down to embers, and through the window he could see the barn standing dark and solid against the sky. Somewhere inside it, Dutch was pacing her stall, waiting for something she didn't understand to happen to her body. Somewhere down the hall, Isabella was lying in the spare bed, surrounded by 8 pages of evidence that the last 4 years of her life had been a carefully designed cage. And upstairs, Lily was sleeping with her arms around a stuffed horse named Professor Oates, dreaming whatever dreams 5-year-olds dream. 3 people under one roof, 3 different kinds of broken. He washed the mugs, checked the locks, and went to the recliner. He'd been sleeping there since Isabella took the spare room, and his back had opinions about it, but the couch was too short and his bed felt too far from the door. The recliner was fine. It was close to the front of the house, close to the stairs, close to everything that mattered. He closed his eyes and listened to the silence. Not the empty silence of the years after Sarah died. The silence that had weight and teeth and followed him from room to room. This was different, quieter, softer. The silence of a house that was holding more than it used to, adjusting to a new shape. Around 2 a.m, he woke to a sound from the barn, not the dogs. They were asleep on the porch. Not the wind. The night was still. Something else. A low rhythmic sound, like heavy breathing amplified by the barn walls. He was on his feet and moving before he was fully awake, pulling on boots and grabbing the flashlight. He crossed the yard in the dark, the grass wet with dew, and pushed open the barn door. Dutch was down. She was lying on her side in the stall, her flanks heaving, her neck dark with sweat. Her legs stretched out stiff, and she made a sound, but deep, guttural, ancient, that raised the hair on the back of Logan's neck. The other horses were awake, heads over their stall doors, watching with wide eyes. "Okay, girl," Logan said, keeping his voice low and steady as he entered the stall. "Okay, here we go." He pulled out his phone and called Kessler. 4 rings, then voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. He texted, "Dutch is foaling. How fast can you get here?" He was kneeling beside the mare when he heard footsteps. Isabella stood at the stall door, barefoot, wearing the flannel over a t-shirt, her hair loose. "I heard you leave," she said. "Is she—" "She's foaling. Vet's not answering. What do you need?" "Towels. There's a stack in the tack room, middle shelf, and the foaling kit. It's a green plastic box under the bench." She disappeared and came back in under a minute with both. She climbed over the stall door and knelt on the other side of Dutch, spreading the towels out. "Have you done this before?" she asked. "Once, with Rosie, 3 years ago. Kessler talked me through it on the phone." He positioned himself behind the mare, checking the foal's presentation. 2 front hooves, wrapped in the amniotic membrane, just beginning to emerge. "This is normal. This is good. She's doing it right." Dutch groaned and pushed, her whole body contracting. Isabella put her hand on the mare's neck, murmuring something soft that Logan couldn't hear. Dutch's ear flicked toward her voice. The next 40 minutes were messy, exhausting, and primal. Dutch pushed, rested, pushed again. The foal came slowly. Hooves, then a nose, then a head, slick and dark and impossibly fragile. Logan cleared the membrane from the nostrils and mouth while Isabella kept steady contact with Dutch, her hands never leaving the mare's neck. And then, with one final heave that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than muscle, the foal slid into the world. It lay on the straw, wet and trembling, blinking against the barn light. A filly. Dark bay, like her mother, with a crooked white blaze down the center of her face. Dutch lifted her head and looked back at the foal. She made a low, rumbling sound. Not distress this time, but something else entirely. She twisted her body around and began licking the filly, long, rough strokes that cleaned the membrane away and stimulated the tiny body underneath. Logan sat back on his heels, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. Not from cold, not from fear. From the sheer, dumb miracle of watching something arrive in the world. Isabella was crying. She wasn't making any sound, but tears were cutting tracks down her cheeks, and she didn't bother wiping them away. She just knelt there, one hand still on Dutch's neck, watching the mare clean her foal. "She's beautiful," Isabella whispered. "She's alive," Logan said. "That's what matters." They sat in the stall for another hour, watching the filly attempt her first wobbly, ridiculous stand. She collapsed 3 times, legs splaying in every direction, before finally making it upright on the 4th try, trembling, unsteady, but vertical. Dutch nuzzled her, guiding her toward the udder, and the filly latched on with the blind, desperate instinct of every newborn creature. Kessler called back at 4:30. Logan told him the foal was out, healthy, nursing. Kessler said he'd come by in the morning to check them both over, and that Logan had done fine. "I didn't do it alone," Logan said, looking at Isabella across the stall. When they finally left the barn, the sky was just beginning to lighten along the eastern ridge. Not sunrise yet, just the first gray suggestion of it, the world holding its breath before the day began. They stood in the yard, both of them dirty and tired and smelling like horse and straw, and the silence between them was different from any silence that had come before. It was the silence of 2 people who'd been through something together. Not romantic, not dramatic, just shared. "Lily's going to lose her mind," Isabella said. Logan almost smiled. "She's going to name it Sparkle." "Would that be so bad?" "It would be terrible, but I'll probably let her." Isabella laughed. Quiet, tired, cracked at the edges. Then she turned and walked toward the house, and Logan watched her go. This woman who'd shown up at his gate 5 days ago with nothing but a bag and a mountain of fear, and who'd just spent an hour on her knees in a horse stall, helping a new life enter the world. He stood there in the gray light, thinking about his mother, about Sarah, about all the women he'd known who deserved a door that opened when they needed it, about the fact that sometimes the most important thing a person can do is just be present, not heroic, not brilliant, not armed with answers, just there. The porch light was still on, the house was warm. Somewhere inside it, his daughter was sleeping. And in the barn behind him, a mare was feeding her foal for the first time, and the world was exactly as complicated and as simple as it had always been. Lily named the foal Sparkle, and Logan didn't fight it. He told himself it was because he was too tired to argue after the long night in the barn. But the truth, the part he wouldn't say out loud, was that watching Lily press her face against the stall bars and whisper, "Hi, Sparkle, I'm going to be your best friend," had undone something in his chest that he didn't have the energy to put back together. So Sparkle it was. The crooked blazed filly with the ridiculous name and the wobbly legs and the complete inability to stand still for more than 30 seconds. 2 weeks had passed since Isabella arrived. 14 days. It felt simultaneously like a month and like no time at all, the way it does when a new person enters your life and rearranges its furniture so quietly that you don't notice until you look around and realize the room is different. The routine had settled into something that almost resembled normal. Logan woke at 5, Isabella shortly after. They fed the horses, mucked the stalls, turned the animals out into the pasture. Isabella had gotten better at the work. Not good exactly, but competent. She no longer startled the geldings, and she'd figured out the rhythm of the pitchfork, and she'd stopped wearing the borrowed flannel in favor of her own clothes from Craven's. The work boots had broken in nicely. She had a blister on her right heel that she refused to complain about, which Logan respected. Lily went to kindergarten 3 days a week at the elementary school in Briarfield. On those mornings, Logan drove her in and picked her up at noon. The other 2 weekdays, and on weekends, she was a permanent fixture at the barn, talking to the horses, drawing pictures, building elaborate obstacle courses out of buckets and fence poles that she insisted Isabella navigate while she timed the performance on a plastic watch that didn't actually work. The legal situation moved slowly, the way legal situations always do. Isabella spoke to the Philadelphia firm almost every day, sometimes for hours. She'd filled 26 pages of the timeline. The attorneys had begun the process of filing an emergency petition to freeze the transfer of the Sterling Family Trust assets, and they'd engaged a forensic accountant to trace the web of shell companies and holding structures Victor had built around Isabella's inheritance. They said it's one of the most elaborate financial control schemes they've ever seen, Isabella told Logan one evening, sitting on the porch with the legal pad in her lap. The forensic accountant called it architecturally sophisticated, like he was admiring it. He probably was. People who build things like that, other people who build things, notice the craftsmanship. It's not a building, it's a cage. Same principle, though. Good construction is good construction, even when the purpose is rotten. She tapped the pen against the pad. The petition should be filed by the end of the week. Once it is, Victor will be formally notified. And that's when... She stopped. That's when he shows up. That's when he does something. I don't know what. He might send lawyers, he might call, he might show up. She set the pad down and crossed her arms over her chest. The attorneys warned me that men like Victor, men who've maintained control for years, tend to escalate when they feel that control slipping. They said to be prepared for anything. What does anything look like? I honestly don't know. That's the problem. With Victor, the weapon is always something you didn't see coming. The petition was filed on a Thursday. Isabella got the confirmation by email at 10 in the morning, and Logan watched her read it standing in the kitchen, her face draining of color even as her jaw set hard. She put the phone down on the counter and didn't touch it for the rest of the day. Friday was quiet. Saturday was quiet. Logan started to wonder if maybe the attorneys had been wrong, if maybe Victor Ashcroft would handle this the way rational people handle legal disputes, through lawyers and paperwork and the slow grinding machinery of the court system. He should have known better. Sunday morning started like every other morning. Logan was in the barn at 5:30, breaking open a bale of hay. Isabella was filling water buckets. Lily was still asleep. The sky was clear, the air cool. and somewhere in the pasture a mockingbird was running through its entire repertoire like an overambitious street performer. At 7:15, a black SUV turned onto the county road and stopped at the end of the driveway. Logan saw it from the barn doorway. He set down the hayhook and watched. The SUV sat there for a full minute, engine running, tinted windows revealing nothing. Then the driver's door opened and a man got out. He was tall, 6'2", maybe 6'3", and he moved with the kind of controlled, unhurried precision that comes from a lifetime of walking into rooms and knowing that everyone in them would adjust to his presence. He wore a dark gray suit, no tie, and shoes that had no business being on a gravel road. His hair was silver at the temples and dark everywhere else, and he had the face of someone who'd been handsome once and had since hardened into something more angular, more calculating. He looked like money that had forgotten it was ever anything else. He didn't walk up the driveway. He just stood at the gate and waited. Logan crossed the yard. Behind him, he heard Isabella's footsteps stop. He didn't turn around, but he felt her go still, the way the horses went still when they sensed a predator. Every muscle locked, every nerve on fire, but the body absolutely motionless. "Can I help you?" Logan called from 20 feet away. The man smiled. It was a practiced smile, perfectly calibrated, warmth without warmth, the kind of expression that worked in conference rooms and political fundraisers and probably fooled 90% of the people who saw it. "Good morning. I'm looking for Isabella Sterling. I believe she may be staying here." "And you are?" "Victor Ashcroft. I'm a close friend of Isabella's." The word friend hung in the air like smoke. Logan kept walking until he was 10 feet from the gate, close enough to talk without shouting, far enough to keep the metal bars between them. "She's not available right now," Logan said. Victor's smile didn't waver, but something shifted behind his eyes. A recalculation, the quick mechanical adjustment of a man encountering unexpected resistance. "I'm sorry. I didn't catch your name." "Logan Mercer. This is my property." "Mr. Mercer." Victor said the name like he was filing it. "I understand this might seem unusual, a stranger showing up at your gate, but Isabella and I have been through a very difficult period, and I've been extremely worried about her. She left without telling anyone where she was going. Her friends, her colleagues, everyone's been frantic. I just want to make sure she's safe." "She's safe." "I appreciate that. I'd love to hear it from her if that's possible." "Like I said, she's not available." The smile faded by a degree. "Mr. Mercer, I don't know what Isabella has told you about our relationship, but I want to be transparent. Isabella has been under a great deal of stress recently. She lost her parents. She's been struggling with the responsibilities of the estate. And frankly, and I say this with love, she hasn't been making the best decisions. I'm concerned about her judgment." "Her judgment seems fine to me." Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. "You've known her for, what, 2 weeks? 3? I've known her for 4 years. I've seen her at her best and at her worst. And I can tell you that when Isabella is in crisis, she tends to run. She finds somewhere that feels safe, she attaches to whoever's nearby, and she tells a version of events that paints herself as the victim. It's a pattern. I've seen it before." Logan felt his hands tighten at his sides. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder and more controlled. The recognition of a species he'd encountered before. The species that talks smoothly and reasonably while dismantling someone else's reality one sentence at a time. "That's an interesting theory," Logan said. "It's not a theory. It's documented." "Her therapist. The therapist you picked for her?" That landed. Victor's composure cracked, just for a fraction of a second. A flicker of genuine surprise, followed immediately by reassembly. He was good. Logan had to give him that. The man could absorb a hit and recalibrate in real time. "I see she's been talking," Victor said, and the warmth was gone from his voice now. Still calm, still controlled, but the pretense of concerned friend had been peeled away like paint off wet wood. "Mr. Mercer, I'm going to be direct with you. Isabella Sterling is my partner, both personally and financially. She has access to assets and information that are legally and contractually intertwined with my business interests. Her departure was unauthorized, and it has caused significant complications. I've already filed a report regarding a stolen vehicle, and my attorneys are preparing additional filings. I know about the car, and I know about the filings." Another recalculation. faster this time. Then you know that this situation is considerably more complicated than whatever story she's told you over coffee. She told me you've spent 4 years systematically isolating her from every person and resource in her life. She told me you took control of her parents' estate, fired anyone who asked questions, and built a financial structure designed to keep her trapped. She told me you used her grief and her loneliness as leverage, and that when she finally left, you reported the rental car stolen and called her unstable. Logan paused. Is any of that wrong? Victor was quiet for a long moment. The morning was silent around them. No mockingbird now, no wind, just the two of them standing on opposite sides of a metal gate with the gravel between them. You're a horse farmer, Victor said. Not a question, an assessment. The tone of a man sizing up an obstacle and finding it beneath his concern. You live on a property that's, 60 acres? 70? You drive a truck that's 10 years old, and you buy your clothes at whatever passes for a store in this town. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because I want you to understand the scale of what you're inserting yourself into. The Sterling estate is worth north of $2 billion. The legal and financial structures surrounding it involve some of the most powerful firms in the country. You are not equipped for this fight. Maybe not, but I'm not the one fighting it. Isabella is. Isabella is a traumatized woman making impulsive decisions based on she's a grown woman who walked out your door because you gave her no other choice. And she's been here for 2 weeks building a legal case that, from what I understand, has your attorneys worried enough to send you out here personally on a Sunday morning in a suit that costs more than my barn. The gate was the only thing between them. Victor stepped closer to it, his hands at his sides, his posture shifting into something more predatory. Not physically threatening. Victor Ashcroft didn't need physical threat. His weapon was presence, the way he occupied space, the way his voice dropped half a register when he wanted someone to feel small. Let me explain what happens next, Victor said, his voice low and even. If Isabella proceeds with this frivolous legal action, my attorneys will respond. They will challenge every claim, subpoena every record, and depose every person she's spoken to, including you. Your financial records, your property, your custody arrangement, everything becomes relevant in a dispute of this magnitude. I don't want that. I genuinely don't. But if she forces my hand, I will protect my interests. Is that a threat? It's information. Sounds like a threat. Then you're hearing what you want to hear. Behind Logan, the screen door opened. He didn't have to turn around to know it was Isabella. He heard her footsteps cross the porch, heard them stop at the top of the steps. The silence changed, charged now, heavy with 4 years of history that Logan could only see the edges of. Hello, Isabella. Victor's voice shifted again, back to the warmth, the concern, the carefully modulated tenderness that probably used to work. You look well. I've been worried about you. Don't. Her voice came from behind Logan, and it was shaking, but not with fear. Or not only with fear. There was anger in it too, the kind that had been compressed for years and was now expanding faster than she could contain it. Don't talk to me like that. Don't stand there and pretend you care about my well-being. Isabella, you reported the car stolen. You told people I was mentally unstable. You're trying to transfer my mother's company out from under me. Those are not the actions of someone who's worried about me, Victor. Those are the actions of someone who's worried about losing control. Victor's jaw tightened. I think we should have this conversation privately. We're having it here. In front of a stranger? Logan isn't a stranger. And I'm done having conversations with you in private. That's how you operate, behind closed doors where nobody can see what you're actually doing. Not anymore. Something dangerous moved across Victor's face. Not rage. Nothing so obvious. More like the cold, precise anger of a machine encountering an input it hadn't been programmed for. Isabella standing up to him, in the open, in front of a witness, was outside the parameters of the system he'd built. And men like Victor did not respond well to things outside the parameters. You've made a mistake, he said, and his voice had gone flat. No warmth, no charm, no pretense, just the raw underlying tone. The one Isabella had probably heard behind closed doors 1,000 times. You've surrounded yourself with people who don't understand the situation, who are feeding your paranoia and who will disappear the moment things get difficult. This man? He gestured toward Logan without looking at him. This man will not protect you when my attorneys start filing. He doesn't have the resources, the knowledge, or the capacity. You will end up alone, Isabella, the way you always do. I'd rather be alone than be yours. The words landed like a slap. Victor went still. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, he didn't speak. His eyes moved from Isabella to Logan and back, and Logan could see the machinery working. The calculation, the strategy, the search for leverage. This was a man who hadn't heard the word no in so long that it took his brain a moment to process it as real. You'll regret this, Victor said finally, quietly, almost gently. And that was the worst part, the gentleness, the way he delivered the threat like a gift, wrapped in softness, presented with care. Everything I've done has been for us, for our future, and you're throwing it away because some farmer with a broken-down ranch told you what you wanted to hear. He told me the truth, that's the difference. Victor looked at Logan one more time, a long, measuring look, the kind of man gives something he's decided to destroy but hasn't yet chosen the method. Then he turned, walked back to the SUV, and got in. The door closed. The engine started. The SUV reversed down the county road and disappeared around the bend. The silence it left behind was enormous. Logan turned around. Isabella was standing on the porch, both hands gripping the railing so hard her knuckles were bloodless. She was breathing fast, shallow, her whole body vibrating with the adrenaline that had nowhere to go now that the source of it was driving away. He walked up the steps and stood beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't speak, just stood there, close enough that she could feel his presence, far enough that she had room. He's going to come back, she said. Her voice was thin, scraped raw. He's not going to stop. I know. He'll do what he said. The subpoenas, the depositions, all of it. He'll come after you, Logan. Your farm, your daughter. He'll use everything he can find. Probably. Aren't you afraid? He thought about it. Genuinely thought about it, standing on his own porch on a Sunday morning with the smell of horse and hay still on his hands, and the sound of his daughter's footsteps moving around upstairs. Yeah, he said. I'm afraid. I've been afraid most of my life in one way or another. But I learned a long time ago that fear and the right thing aren't mutually exclusive. You can be scared and still not move. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the night I opened the gate. She turned to him, and her eyes were wet, and her face was a mess of fear and relief and exhaustion and something else, something she probably couldn't name because it was too new and too fragile and too tangled up in everything else she was feeling. Why? She said. Why do you keep doing this? Helping me? Standing there while a man like Victor Ashcroft threatens to tear your life apart? You have nothing to gain from this. I've got a daughter who's going to grow up in this world, and I want her to grow up knowing that when someone needed help, her father didn't look the other way. That's what I gain. Lily appeared in the doorway behind them, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Who was that man? Logan and Isabella exchanged a glance. Just someone who was lost, Logan said. He was looking for directions. He looked mean. Some people look like that when they're lost. Lily accepted this with the partial skepticism of a 5-year-old who suspects she's not getting the full story but isn't invested enough to push. Can I go see Sparkle? After breakfast. Can Isabella come? Isabella wiped her eyes quickly and managed a smile that was only slightly broken. I'll be there. Lily disappeared back inside. Logan let out a long breath. That won't be the last of it, Isabella said. I know. He'll escalate. The attorneys warned me about this. When direct confrontation doesn't work, he shifts to indirect pressure. He'll look for weak points, people around me, people I care about. He'll find pressure points and push. What kind of pressure points? Anything. Financial, reputational, personal. He once destroyed a business partner's marriage because the man voted against him on a board resolution. Not directly. He never does anything directly. He leaked information, planted stories, made sure the right people heard the wrong things. 6 months later, the man's wife filed for divorce, and he resigned from the board. All because of a vote. All because of defiance. That's what Victor can't tolerate. Not disagreement, say, defiance. The two are different in his mind. You can disagree with him in private, behind closed doors, where he can manage the narrative. But public defiance? Walking away? That's an existential threat. It undermines the image he spent his entire career building. They went inside. Logan made breakfast, eggs and toast, because it was a day that required real food, not cereal. Lily talked about Sparkle and about a girl at school named Madison who had claimed that horses couldn't swim, which Lily considered an outrage of the highest order. Horses can definitely swim, Lily said, stabbing her eggs with a fork. Right, Daddy? They can. They're good at it. I told Madison that, and she said I was lying, so I told her she was lying. And then Mrs. Patterson said we both had to sit in the thinking chair. The thinking chair? It's where you sit when you say someone's lying, even if they are lying. Sounds fair. It's not fair. Madison was wrong. Isabella, who had been quiet through most of breakfast, said, "Sometimes being right and being heard are two different things. The important thing is that you know the truth." Lily pointed her fork at Isabella. "That's exactly what Daddy says." "Your daddy's a smart man." "Sometimes. He burned the pancakes last week." "One time," Logan said. "I burned them one time." "They were black, Daddy." "They were well done." Lily gave him the look, the one that said she was not fooled, and went back to her eggs. Isabella caught Logan's eye across the table, and there it was again. That flash of something warm and complicated and terrifying. Not romance, not yet, maybe not ever. Just the feeling of being seen by someone who understood the particular shape of your life and didn't look away from its rough edges. After breakfast, Logan walked out to check the fence line he'd been putting off repairing. The back pasture section was down in two places. The posts rotted through at the base. He'd need to dig out the old ones and set new ones in concrete, which was at least a full day's work. He started measuring and marking while the horses grazed nearby, and Captain, the old quarter horse, 23 now and creaky but still proud, came over and stood beside him like a foreman supervising a job site. "Don't judge me," Logan said to the horse. "I know it's overdue." Captain blew out a breath and walked away. Isabella came out an hour later, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to Logan and sat on the fence rail, the part that was still standing, and watched him work. "I called the attorneys," she said, "told them about Victor's visit. They said it was expected. They also said that what he did, showing up here making direct threats, actually helps our case. It establishes a pattern of intimidation." So his visit was a mistake. His visit was arrogant. He assumed he could show up and I'd fold. He's so used to people folding that he doesn't know what to do when they don't. She sipped the coffee. But he'll adapt. He always adapts. The next move won't be as clumsy. What do the attorneys recommend? Document everything. If he contacts me again, calls, emails, anything, record it. If anyone unfamiliar shows up at the farm, get their name and license plate. And she hesitated. They suggested I consider filing a protective order. Against Victor? Against Victor, based on the pattern of coercive control and the direct threats he made today. They said it won't stop him entirely, but it creates a legal record that strengthens the larger case. What do you think? I think a piece of paper won't stop a man like Victor Ashcroft, but I also think it's a move he doesn't expect me to make. And anything he doesn't expect throws him off his game. Logan drove the post hole digger into the ground and levered out a chunk of clay. Then do it. It means more exposure, more public record. My name, his name, the details of what happened, all of it potentially accessible. If any of this leaks to the press, it becomes a story. Billionaire heiress accuses finance mogul of abuse. That's a headline he'd kill to prevent. Would the attention be bad for you? It would be complicated. The Sterling name carries weight in certain circles. My parents built something real, something respectable. Dragging it through a public legal battle with Victor Ashcroft. She trailed off, staring into her mug. My mother would have hated this. She was private. She believed in solving problems quietly. Your mother didn't have Victor Ashcroft. No, she had my father who worshipped the ground she walked on. Isabella's voice softened. He used to bring her coffee every morning, every single morning for 28 years, even when they were arguing, even when things were hard. He'd walk into her office with a cup of coffee and set it on her desk and walk out. It was his way of saying, "I'm still here." She told me once that that one small thing kept them together through everything. Logan set the digger down and looked at the mug in his hand. Then he looked at her. She looked at him. And neither of them said anything about the coffee she'd just walked out to bring him, because some things didn't need to be said. They just needed to be noticed. The rest of the day passed in the rhythm that had become their norm. Work, conversation, silence, work again. Lily came home from playing at the barn smelling like hay and horse, and declared that Sparkle had tried to follow her out of the stall, which was either adorable or a containment problem depending on your perspective. That evening, Logan's phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He answered it in the kitchen, leaning against the counter. "Mr. Mercer, this is David Whitfield, of Whitfield and Associates. I represent Victor Ashcroft." Logan felt his shoulders tighten. "I'm listening." "I'm calling as a courtesy. My client has asked me to inform you that a formal investigation has been initiated regarding the circumstances of Ms. Sterling's departure from his residence. Additionally, we'll be filing a motion to compel the return of certain proprietary documents and digital assets that Ms. Sterling may have in her possession. As a party who may be housing these materials, you could be subject to subpoena." "I don't have any documents." "That may be. But the motion will require a thorough accounting of any materials present on your property that relate to Ashcroft Holdings, the Sterling Family Trust, or any affiliated entities. I trust you'll cooperate fully." "Send whatever you need to send. I'll have my people look at it." A pause. "Your people?" "Good night, Mr. Whitfield." He hung up. Isabella was standing in the hallway, and from her face she'd heard enough. "It's starting," she said. "It started the day you left. This is just the part where it gets loud." She leaned against the wall, arms folded, and Logan could see the fear working its way through her, the tightening of her shoulders, the way her fingers dug into her own arms. But she didn't crumble. She didn't run for the spare room. She stood there, in his hallway, in her work boots and jeans, and a t-shirt with a smudge of dirt on the collar, and she held. "I don't have people," Logan said, "just so you know. But he doesn't need to know that." And despite everything, the threat, the fear, the weight of what was coming, she laughed. Short, sharp, almost involuntary. The sound of someone discovering that they could still find something funny in the middle of a disaster. "You bluffed a corporate attorney." "I was raised by a man who lied about everything. I picked up a few things." She shook her head, and the laughter faded, but something remained in her face. A warmth, a steadiness, a look that said, "I am standing in your hallway, and I am terrified, and I am not leaving." Logan looked at her, and he thought about what Victor had said at the gate. "This man will not protect you." And he thought about what he knew about himself, that he was a horse farmer with a bad back and an old truck and a mortgage he was 3 months behind on, that he didn't have attorneys or resources or any idea how to fight a man who owned pieces of the world, that Victor Ashcroft was right about almost everything except the one thing that mattered. He wasn't going to move. The subpoena arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a man in a gray polo shirt who drove a sedan with tinted windows and didn't make eye contact when he handed the envelope to Logan on the porch. Logan signed for it, watched the sedan back down the driveway, and stood there holding the envelope like it was something that might bite. Isabella was in the barn. He found her brushing Rosie, long, smooth strokes down the mare's neck, the way he'd taught her. She looked up when she heard his boots on the concrete and saw the envelope in his hand and stopped brushing. "Is that what I think it is?" "Depends on what you think it is." "Logan?" He held it up. "Subpoena. For me. They want financial records, property documents, any correspondence between you and me, any materials related to Ashcroft Holdings or the Sterling Trust currently on my property." He paused. "And they want to depose me. In Philadelphia. 2 weeks from Thursday." She set the brush down on the stall ledge. Rosie nudged her shoulder, looking for more attention, and Isabella absently pressed her hand against the mare's face. "I'm sorry." "Don't. This is exactly what he said he'd do. He's dragging you into it." "I was already in it. This just makes it official." He tucked the envelope into his back pocket. "I need to call someone. An actual lawyer, not Gail's kid, the paralegal. Someone who can tell me what I have to hand over and what I don't." I'll pay for it. No. Logan, you can't afford. I said no. His voice was sharper than he intended, and he heard it and pulled back. I'm sorry, but this is my problem. My name on the paper, my deposition, my property they're asking about. If I'm going to fight this, I need to fight it on my own terms, not with his money and not with yours. She flinched, not visibly. She was too controlled for that. But he saw it in her eyes, the quick contraction of someone who'd been pushed away and was trying not to show how much it stung. I didn't mean, he started. I know what you meant. And you're right. I hate that this is happening to you because of me. It's happening to me because of him. There's a difference. He called a lawyer that afternoon, Tom Bridwell, a solo practitioner in Harrisburg who'd been recommended by Dr. Kessler, of all people. Kessler's brother had gone through a nasty divorce involving a lot of money and a lot of lawyers, and Bridwell had apparently been the only attorney in the state willing to go toe-to-toe with a Philadelphia firm on a county court budget. Bridwell answered his own phone, which Logan liked immediately. He was blunt, profane, and completely unbothered by the name Victor Ashcroft. Never heard of him, Bridwell said. Is that supposed to scare me? It scares most people. I'm not most people. I'm a 61-year-old man with a bad knee and a practice that runs out of a converted dentist's office. What's he going to do? Take my waiting room? Send me the subpoena. I'll review it and tell you what's garbage and what's real. Logan scanned the document and emailed it. Bridwell called back in an hour. 80% garbage, he said. Right? They're phishing. They want your financial records to see if Isabella's been funneling money to you, which would support their narrative that she's financially erratic. The correspondence request is broad enough to be challenged on relevance. The deposition, though, that's real. They'll want to establish the nature of your relationship, how long she's been staying with you, whether you've been coaching her testimony. Coaching her testimony? Their theory is that Isabella is an unstable woman who's been manipulated by someone, that would be you, in this version, into making false accusations against her benevolent partner. They'll try to paint you as an opportunist. Small-town farmer takes in a confused billionaire, fills her head with stories, positions himself to benefit from the fallout. That's insane. That's litigation. Welcome to it. Listen, Logan, I need you to understand something. These people, Ashcroft's firm, they don't need to win. They just need to make fighting so expensive and so exhausting that the other side gives up. That's the play. They'll bury you in paper, drag you to depositions, challenge every motion, request every extension. They'll bleed you dry on time and money until you tell Isabella to take her problems somewhere else. That's not going to happen. I believe you, but I needed to say it out loud so you know what you're signing up for. The next 2 weeks were a blur of phone calls, emails, and legal paperwork that made Logan's eyes glaze over. Bridwell was good. Better than good, actually. He had a prosecutor's instinct for finding the weakness in an argument, and a country lawyer's gift for making complicated things simple. He challenged the scope of the subpoena and got it narrowed significantly, eliminating the financial records request entirely and limiting the correspondence demand to materials directly related to Ashcroft Holdings. But the deposition stood, and Logan was going to Philadelphia. Isabella offered to go with him. He told her no, then changed his mind, then changed it back again. Finally, she said, I'm going. You can drive or I can take a bus, but I'm going to be in that building when you walk out of that room. Fine. Fine. Lily stayed with Gail, who spoiled her with homemade cookies and unlimited TV time and reported via text that Lily had taught Gail's cat to sit, which Gail said was either impressive or a sign that the cat had given up on life. The drive to Philadelphia took 3 hours. Logan wore the only suit he owned, a dark blue one he'd bought for Sarah's funeral and hadn't touched since. It fit poorly. He'd lost weight since then, and the shoulders were too wide and the pants too long. Isabella sat in the passenger seat in a black blazer and gray slacks, her hair pulled back, looking like a different version of herself. The version that belonged in cities and conference rooms and places where the carpets were thick and the coffee was real. You look uncomfortable, she said. I am uncomfortable. This suit was made for a different person. You look fine. I look like a kid wearing his dad's clothes. You look like a man who doesn't wear suits. There's nothing wrong with that. The law firm occupied 3 floors of a glass tower downtown. Bridwell met them in the lobby. A stocky man with a gray mustache and the general demeanor of someone who'd been irritated since 1987 and saw no reason to stop now. He shook Logan's hand, nodded at Isabella, and led them to an elevator. "Here's how this works," Bridwell said as they rode up. "They'll have 2, maybe 3 attorneys in the room, a court reporter. They'll ask you questions under oath. Answer honestly, keep it short, and don't volunteer anything they didn't ask for. If I object, stop talking immediately. Don't argue with them, don't get emotional, and for the love of everything, don't get clever. Clever loses depositions." "Got it. One more thing. They're going to try to make you angry. That's the whole game. They want you flustered, defensive, saying things you haven't thought through. The calmer you stay, the less they get. Think of it like dealing with a horse that's testing you. Don't react. Just hold your ground." Logan almost smiled. "You know about horses?" "I know about difficult animals. Lawyers qualify." The deposition room was exactly what Logan had expected. Long table, leather chairs, water pitchers, a window with a view of buildings that looked like other buildings. 3 attorneys sat on the opposite side, all in suits that actually fit, all with the polished, well-rested look of people who charged $500 an hour and slept soundly at night. The lead attorney was a woman named Catherine Voss, mid-40s, sharp features, a voice that could cut sheet metal. She introduced herself, stated the purpose of the deposition, and began. The first hour was mundane. Background questions: his name, his occupation, his property, his relationship to Isabella Sterling. When did she arrive at his farm? Under what circumstances? Had she paid him any money? Had she offered him any financial incentive to provide shelter? "No," Logan said to each question, short, direct, the way Bridwell had coached him. Then Voss shifted gears. "Mr. Mercer, are you aware that Miss Sterling has been diagnosed with anxiety disorder and has a documented history of erratic behavior during periods of stress?" Bridwell objected before Logan could open his mouth. "Assumes facts not in evidence, and any medical records would be privileged." Voss smiled thinly. "I'll rephrase. Mr. Mercer, in the time Miss Sterling has been staying at your property, have you observed any behavior that you would characterize as irrational, impulsive, or inconsistent?" Logan looked at her. "I've observed a woman recovering from 4 years of psychological abuse. She's been consistent, lucid, and honest. The most impulsive thing I've seen her do is name a horse Sparkle, and that was actually my daughter's idea." A muscle twitched near Voss's eye. Behind her, one of the junior attorneys coughed. "Mr. Mercer, have you and Miss Sterling entered into a romantic or sexual relationship?" "No." "Has she expressed romantic interest in you?" "No." "Have you expressed romantic interest in her?" "No." "Then how would you characterize your relationship?" Logan paused. He thought about the mornings in the barn, the coffee on the porch, the night they'd delivered Sparkle. He thought about the way she looked at Lily, and the way Lily looked at her, and the way the house sounded different now. Fuller, louder, more like a place where people actually lived instead of just survived. "She needed help," he said. "I helped her. That's the relationship." Voss pressed on for another hour. She asked about Victor's visit to the farm, about the phone call from Whitfield, about Isabella's legal team in Philadelphia. She asked whether Logan had encouraged Isabella to file the petition, whether he'd helped her compile the timeline, whether he stood to benefit financially from any legal action against Ashcroft Holdings. Logan answered each question the same way: short, honest, unadorned. Bridwell objected when necessary, which was often. The junior attorneys took notes. The court reporter's fingers never stopped moving. Then Voss pulled out a folder and slid a photograph across the table. It was a picture of Logan's farm taken from the road. The gate, the driveway, the house in the background. Recent from the angle of the light. "Mr. Mercer, are you aware that your property has 2 outstanding liens totaling approximately $47,000? Logan felt his stomach drop. Not because the information was wrong. It wasn't. The liens were real. One from a feed supplier he'd been slowly paying off for 2 years. One from a hospital bill after Lily's emergency room visit last winter when she'd fallen off the porch and broken her wrist. He hadn't told Isabella about either one. He hadn't told anyone. "I'm aware of my financial situation," he said carefully. And are you aware that your mortgage is currently 93 days past due? I'm working on it. Mr. Mercer, isn't it true that your farm is in significant financial distress? And isn't it possible that providing shelter to a woman worth over $2 billion might represent a financial opportunity that a person in your situation would find difficult to resist? Bridwell was on his feet. Objection. Argumentative, speculative, and frankly insulting. Ms. Voss, my client is not on trial here. If you have a question about his actions, ask it, but don't sit there and imply that the only reason a person would help someone in danger is money. Voss didn't blink. I'll withdraw the question. But the damage was done. The implication was in the room now, hanging in the air like smoke. Logan could feel it settling on his skin. The deposition ended at 4:30. Logan walked out of the room with his jaw tight and his hands shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of holding still for 5 hours while a team of attorneys tried to turn his decency into evidence of corruption. Isabella was in the hallway. She stood up when she saw him, searching his face for damage. He walked past her without stopping. Through the lobby, out the glass doors, and onto the sidewalk, where he stood in the noise and the exhaust and the crush of a city he didn't belong in, and he breathed. She came out behind him, stood beside him, didn't touch him, didn't speak, just stood there, the way he'd stood on the porch that Sunday morning when Victor came to the gate. Present, steady, not asking him to be okay. They know about the liens, he said finally. The mortgage, all of it. They dug into my finances, and they're going to use it to argue that I'm in this for the money. That's absurd. It's effective. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to create doubt. Logan, I'm 93 days behind on the mortgage, Isabella. I owe $47,000 I don't have. My daughter broke her wrist last winter, and the hospital bill alone was $11,000 after insurance, and I'm still paying it off at $200 a month. He turned to face her. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because they're going to use it, and you need to know what's coming. They can't build a case on your financial situation. It's circumstantial at best. They don't need a case. They need a narrative. Rich woman moves in with broke farmer. Farmer suddenly develops a conscience about her abusive ex. The story writes itself. That's not what happened. I know that. You know that. But a judge who's never met either of us? All they see is the story that's presented, and Victor's people are very good at presenting stories. They stood on the sidewalk as the city moved around them. Cars, pedestrians, the rhythmic churn of a world that didn't care about their problems. Isabella was quiet for a long time, her arms crossed, her face turned slightly away from him. I want to pay off the liens, she said. No. Listen to me. Not as charity, not as a gift. As fair compensation for room and board and the work you've done supporting my case. A consulting fee. Something the lawyers can structure so it's above board and documented. Isabella, if you won't let me do it as a friend, let me do it as a strategy. If the liens are paid, they lose their leverage. They can't paint you as financially desperate if you're not financially desperate. I am financially desperate. Paying off 2 liens doesn't change that. It changes the narrative. And you just said yourself, the narrative is what matters. He hated that she was right. He hated the whole thing. The fact that his private financial failures were now courtroom ammunition. The fact that helping someone in trouble had turned into a legal liability. The fact that a man he'd never met until 3 weeks ago had more power over his life than he did. But she was right, and he was tired. And the suit didn't fit, and the city was too loud, and his daughter was 60 miles away eating cookies at Gail's house and probably wondering why her father wasn't home yet. I'll think about it, he said. That means no. It means I'll think about it. Bridwell drove them to dinner at a diner near the highway. The kind of place with laminated menus and bottomless coffee, the kind of place where Logan could actually breathe. Over meatloaf and mashed potatoes, Bridwell laid out the situation. Today was reconnaissance, he said, cutting his meatloaf with surgical precision. They wanted to see what you'd do under pressure. And you did well. You stayed calm. You didn't take the bait. You answered what they asked, and nothing more. But here's the thing. The deposition isn't the fight. It's preparation for the fight. The real battle is the hearing on Isabella's petition. That's where everything gets decided. When is the hearing? Isabella asked. 6 weeks. The judge assigned to the case is the Honorable Patricia Wynne. She's fair, she's thorough, and she doesn't tolerate games. That's good for us. The bad news is that Ashcroft's team has filed a counterpetition claiming that Isabella's departure was a breach of fiduciary duty and that the emergency freeze on the trust assets is causing material harm to ongoing business operations. That's a lie, Isabella said. The trust assets are my inheritance. They have nothing to do with his business operations. He commingled them deliberately. I know, and we can prove that. But proving it requires the forensic accounting work to be finished. And right now your team in Philadelphia says they need at least another month. We don't have another month. The hearing is in 6 weeks. Then they need to work faster. Bridwell set down his fork. Let me be blunt with both of you. This case is winnable. The evidence of financial manipulation is strong. The pattern of coercive control is well documented. Isabella, your timeline is the best piece of evidence I've seen in 30 years of practice. And Victor's decision to show up at Logan's farm and make threats in front of a witness was spectacularly stupid. But winning requires resources, and it requires witnesses who can corroborate Isabella's account. What kind of witnesses? Logan asked. People who saw the control in action. People who were pushed out or fired for raising questions. The personal assistant, Claire, was it? The financial advisor. The college roommate. Anyone who interacted with Victor and Isabella during those 4 years and can testify to what they observed. Isabella shook her head slowly. Those people are scattered. Some of them won't want to get involved. Victor is powerful enough that testifying against him carries real risk. I understand that, but without corroboration, it's your word against his. And he's got a team of attorneys whose entire job is to make your word look unreliable. The drive home was mostly silent. Isabella fell asleep in the passenger seat somewhere around Harrisburg, her head against the window, her face slack and unguarded, in a way it never was when she was awake. Logan drove with both hands on the wheel and the radio off, watching the headlights eat the road ahead of him. He thought about the deposition, about Voss's voice, cool and surgical, turning his poverty into a weapon, about the photograph of his farm, his home, the place where his daughter was growing up, the place where Sarah had wanted to build a life, being slid across a conference table like evidence of weakness. And he thought about what Bridwell had said about witnesses, about people who'd seen the truth and might be willing to say it out loud. He picked up Lily from Gail's at 9:30. She was asleep on Gail's couch, clutching a cookie in one hand and a crayon in the other. He carried her to the truck, buckled her into the car seat, and drove the last mile home. Isabella woke when the truck stopped and helped him carry Lily inside. Not carrying her exactly, but holding the door, pulling back the covers, finding the stuffed horse named Professor Oates, and tucking it under Lily's arm. They stood in the hallway outside Lily's room, both of them wrung out and running on fumes. The witnesses, Isabella said quietly. Claire, my former assistant. She reached out to me 2 months before I left. An email to an account Victor didn't know about. She said she'd kept records, notes, emails, documents she'd copied before he fired her. She said she'd been waiting for me to leave, and that when I did, she'd be ready to help. Did you respond? I was too scared. I deleted the email and tried to forget about it. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. But I remember her email address. And if she meant what she said, if she kept those records, that could change everything. Then find her. It might not work. She might have moved on. She might be too afraid. Or she might be sitting somewhere right now, waiting for the same thing you waited for. A reason to stop being afraid. Isabella opened her eyes and looked at him. In the dim hallway light, with Lily's nightlight casting a faint purple glow through the cracked bedroom door, she looked exhausted and determined and fragile and fierce all at once. Not a billionaire. Not a victim. Just a person standing at the edge of the hardest thing she'd ever done, trying to decide if she had enough left to jump. I'll find her, she said. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, Logan agreed. She went to the spare room. He went to the recliner. The house settled around them the way it always did, while creaking, sighing, holding its breath. And somewhere in the barn, Sparkle was sleeping beside her mother in the straw, and the stars were turning overhead, and the world was still the world, indifferent and enormous, and occasionally, when you weren't looking, capable of something that felt almost like grace. Logan lay in the dark and listened to the quiet, and he thought about a woman named Claire who'd kept records and waited. and a woman named Isabella who'd walked out a door, and a little girl upstairs who believed that horses could swim and that the right name for a foal was Sparkle. And he thought about himself, about the liens and the mortgage and the suit that didn't fit and the deposition where 3 attorneys in a glass tower had tried to reduce his entire life to a financial incentive. He thought about whether they were right, not about the money. He knew they were wrong about that, but about the rest of it, about whether a man with nothing was qualified to stand beside a woman who'd lost everything, about whether stubbornness was the same thing as strength or just a different kind of foolishness. He didn't have the answer, but he knew one thing. In the morning, he'd get up at 5 and he'd feed the horses and he'd make the bad coffee and he'd walk out to the barn where the work was waiting and Isabella would be there and Lily would be there. And the fight would continue, not because any of them were brave or certain or equipped for it, but because they were still standing, and standing was enough. Claire Novak answered on the 3rd ring. Isabella had spent most of the morning at the kitchen table staring at her phone, typing the number she'd memorized from that deleted email, then erasing it, then typing it again. Logan had watched her do this 4 times before he said, "You're going to wear out the screen." And she'd looked at him with something between irritation and gratitude and pressed call. 3 rings. Then a voice, cautious, tight, the voice of someone who'd been expecting this call for 2 years but hadn't let herself believe it would actually come. "This is Claire." "Claire, it's Isabella. Isabella Sterling." A long pause. Logan could hear it from where he stood at the counter. Not the words, just the shape of the silence, the particular quality of 2 people reconnecting across a distance that wasn't measured in miles. "I kept everything," Claire said, and then she started talking. The conversation lasted 2 hours. Isabella took notes on the legal pad, the same one she'd been using for the timeline, now thick with pages, her handwriting getting smaller and faster as Claire laid out what she had. Emails, internal memos, financial documents she'd copied onto a personal drive before Victor's people wiped her access. Records of meetings where Victor had discussed, in explicit terms, his strategy for consolidating control over the Sterling estate. Notes from conversations where he'd instructed staff to limit Isabella's contact with outside advisors, redirect her mail, monitor her phone usage. "He had a name for it," Claire said, her voice crackling through the speaker. "He called it the architecture. Like it was a building he was constructing. He'd say things like, 'The architecture is almost complete,' or 'We need to reinforce the architecture on the financial side.' It was a game to him, a design project." Isabella closed her eyes. Logan watched her from the doorway and saw the way her hand tightened on the pen, the way her shoulders drew in. Hearing it confirmed and hearing someone else describe the system from the outside was different from knowing it from the inside. Harder in some ways, clearer in others. "Will you testify?" Isabella asked. Another pause, longer this time. "He'll come after me." "He's already come after everyone. That's all he knows how to do." "I have a family now, Isabella. A husband, a 2-year-old. I know what I'm asking, and I won't pretend it's safe because it's not. But Claire, if nobody says it out loud, if nobody stands up in front of a judge and says what he did, then he keeps doing it. To the next person, and the next one, and the next one after that. The architecture doesn't stop building itself just because we walk away from it." The line was quiet for so long that Logan thought Claire had hung up. Then, "Send me the details. The hearing date, the attorneys, everything. I'll talk to my husband tonight." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. I haven't said yes." But she said yes. 2 days later, an email arrived from Claire's personal address with a single line, "I'm in," and an attached drive link containing 412 files. The forensic accountant called it a goldmine. Isabella's attorneys in Philadelphia called it case-altering. Bridwell, when he reviewed a summary of the documents, called it the kind of thing that makes defense attorneys develop drinking problems. But Victor Ashcroft didn't know about Claire. Not yet. And the legal team agreed. That element of surprise needed to be preserved until the hearing. The 6 weeks before the court date passed in a strange, compressed rhythm, each day feeling both too long and too short. Logan fixed the back fence. He replaced the gutter on the barn. He caught up on 2 months of the mortgage with money from selling Captain's tack and some equipment he'd been storing in the shed. Old stuff, Sarah's parents' things, items he should have let go of years ago. He didn't tell Isabella about it, and she didn't ask, though he suspected she noticed. Isabella worked, not on the farm, though she continued with the morning routine, the feeding and the mucking in the water, tasks that had become second nature to her, but on the case. She spent hours on the phone with the attorneys, reviewing documents, preparing her testimony. The timeline had grown to 53 pages. She could recite dates and details with the precision of an air traffic controller calling out coordinates, and when she rehearsed her testimony with Bridwell over speakerphone, her voice was steady and clear and devastating. But at night, when Lily was in bed and the house was quiet, the steadiness cracked. Logan found her on the porch one evening, with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. He sat down beside her and didn't say anything, and after a few minutes she said, "I keep thinking about what happens if we lose." "We're not going to lose." "You don't know that." "No, but I know the evidence, and I know you, and I know that Bridwell hasn't lost a case in 4 years, and he's not planning to start with this one. Bridwell is 70% bluff and 30% meatloaf, and 100% effective. The math doesn't work, but neither does he, and yet here we are." She laughed, but it was thin, and it faded quickly. "If we lose, Victor gets everything, the trust, the company, the properties. My parents' entire legacy gets absorbed into his empire, and there won't be anything left of them, not even their name. Then we don't lose." "Logan." "Isabella." She turned to him, and in the porch light her face was open in a way he'd rarely seen. No armor, no calculation, just the raw, unprotected expression of a person who'd run out of walls to hide behind. "I need to tell you something." "Okay." "When I showed up at your gate that night, when I was standing in the rain, trying to decide whether to knock or keep walking, the only reason I stopped was because I saw the barn light. Not the house light, the barn light. And I thought, someone is out in a barn in the middle of a storm checking on animals instead of sitting inside where it's warm and dry. And that meant something to me. It meant that whoever lived here cared about things that couldn't ask for help. And I needed to find someone like that." Logan looked at her. The barn light. He remembered that night. The rain, the wind, Dutch pacing her stall, the flashlight in his hand. He'd been out there because the horse needed him, not because he was trying to be noble, not because he had any idea that a woman would appear at his gate and turn his life inside out, just because the horse needed him. "I was just checking on Dutch," he said. "I know, that's the point. You weren't trying to be anything. You were just being who you are, and that's why I stopped." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said the only thing he knew how to say. "We should get some sleep. Big day's coming." "You always say that when you don't know what to say." "Because it's always true. Sleep is always a good idea." She stood up and paused at the door. "Logan?" "Yeah. Whatever happens at the hearing, whatever comes after, I want you to know that these weeks here have been the most important weeks of my life. Not because of the legal case. Because of this." She gestured vaguely at the porch, the yard, the barn in the dark. "Because of breakfast with Lily, and bad coffee, and watching Sparkle learn to run. Because of you telling me to take things one at a time when I couldn't see past the next hour. I've spent my whole adult life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. You're the first person who ever just wanted me to be okay." She went inside before he could respond, which was probably for the best, because what he would have said, what was sitting in his chest, pressing against his ribs, demanding to be spoken, was something that couldn't be said yet. Not now. Not before the fight was finished. He stayed on the porch and listened to the night, and he let the thing in his chest stay where it was, unspoken, unfinished, waiting. The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday in early October. The drive to Philadelphia took 3 hours, same as before, but this time the truck carried 3 people instead of 2. Lily sat in the back seat in a dress that Isabella had ordered online, yellow with small white flowers, and new shoes that she'd already scuffed walking through the barn that morning. "Why do I have to wear a dress?" Lily asked for the 4th time. "Because we're going to a courthouse and people wear nice clothes to courthouses," Logan said. "You're wearing a suit. You hate suits." "Yes, I do." "Then why are you wearing it?" Because sometimes you do things you don't like for people you care about. Lily digested this with the skepticism of a child who has been told to eat broccoli for similar reasons. Is Isabella going to talk to the judge? She is. Is she going to tell the truth? She is. Good. Mrs. Patterson says the truth is important even when it's hard. Mrs. Patterson's right. She's also right about horses swimming. I looked it up. Gail met them at the courthouse steps to take Lily. Lily hugged Logan's legs, then hugged Isabella's legs, then said, "Tell the judge about the horses," which wasn't relevant to the case, but felt, in some way that Logan couldn't articulate, like the most important thing anyone said all day. The courtroom was smaller than Logan had expected. Not the grand wood-paneled chambers he'd seen in movies, but a functional room with fluorescent lights and a gray carpet and a bench where Judge Patricia Wynn sat with the expression of someone who'd seen everything the legal system could produce and had long since stopped being impressed by any of it. Victor Ashcroft was already there. He sat behind his legal team, Catherine Voss and 2 associates, in a charcoal suit that fit like it had been grown onto his body. He looked calm, controlled, the kind of calm that came from absolute confidence that the machinery he'd built would continue to function as designed. When Isabella walked in, Victor turned his head. Their eyes met. Logan watched it happen and felt the temperature in the room shift, something electric and ugly moving through the air between them. Isabella held the look for 3 seconds, then 4, then 5. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. And something moved across Victor's face. Not anger, not worry, but the faintest shadow of uncertainty. The look of a man who's seen something in someone he thought he knew completely, and realizing he might have been wrong. Isabella sat down next to her lead attorney, a woman named Sandra Park from the Philadelphia firm. Bridwell sat beside Logan in the gallery, his bad knee stretched into the aisle. "Showtime," Bridwell murmured. The hearing opened with procedural arguments that made Logan's eyes glaze over. Motions to dismiss, objections to evidence scope, challenges to standing. Judge Wynn handled each one with the brisk efficiency of someone sorting mail. Accepted, denied, deferred, move on. She had the manner of a woman who valued her time and expected everyone else to value it too. Then Sandra Park called Isabella to the stand. Isabella stood up, walked to the witness box, and sat down. She was wearing the black blazer and gray slacks from the deposition trip, her hair pulled back, her face composed. But Logan could see her hands, flat on her thighs, pressing down, the way you press down when you're trying to keep yourself from shaking. Park guided her through the early testimony with careful, methodical questions. The death of her parents, the inheritance, Victor's entry into her life, the gradual consolidation of control, financial, social, psychological. Isabella answered each question in the same clear, measured voice she'd used in her rehearsals. But here, in this room, under oath, with Victor sitting 15 feet away, the words carried a different weight. They were no longer preparations. They were the thing itself. "Ms. Sterling, can you describe the moment you realized that Mr. Ashcroft's involvement in your financial affairs had crossed from advisory to controlling?" Isabella was quiet for a moment. "It wasn't a single moment," she said. "That's what makes it so difficult to explain. It was gradual, like water rising. You don't notice it until you realize you can't touch the bottom anymore." She paused. "But if I had to choose one moment, it was January 2023. I wanted to make a donation to my mother's alma mater, a scholarship fund in her name, $25,000. And when I tried to authorize the transfer, I was told that all discretionary expenditures over $5,000 required co-approval. Victor's approval. For my own money. For my own trust. And when I asked him about it, he said it was a standard safeguard, and that I should be grateful someone was watching out for my interests. Did you question the policy? I tried. He sat me down and explained very patiently all the reasons it was necessary. Tax implications, liability concerns, fiduciary responsibility. He talked for 45 minutes. By the end, I couldn't remember why I'd been upset. That was his skill. He could talk the ground out from under you until you weren't sure where you were standing. Voss objected. Characterization, she said. Judge Wynn overruled. The testimony continued through the morning. Isabella walked through the timeline: Claire's firing, the removal of the financial advisor, the isolation from friends and colleagues. She described Victor's methods with the clinical precision of someone who'd spent weeks organizing her memories into evidence. But underneath the precision, the pain was visible, not performed, not dramatized, just there, the way scars are there. Part of the surface, part of the record. When Park asked about the night she left, Isabella's composure slipped for the first time. Not dramatically. She didn't cry, didn't break down. But her voice changed, dropping to something softer and more ragged, and her hands moved from her thighs to the edge of the witness box, gripping the wood. "I heard him on the phone," she said. "He was in his office, and the door was open, and he was talking to someone about transferring the remaining shares of my mother's company, Sterling Dynamics, into a new holding entity. An entity I had no stake in. He was laughing. He was laughing about erasing the last piece of my parents' legacy, and he didn't even close the door because he didn't think I mattered enough to hear." "What did you do?" "I went upstairs. I packed one bag. I walked down the stairs, past his office, out the front door. He was still on the phone. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't think I'd actually go through with it." She looked directly at Victor for the first time since taking the stand. "He always assumed I'd come back. That was his fundamental mistake. He built the whole architecture around the assumption that I had nowhere else to go." "And where did you go?" "I drove. I didn't have a destination. I just drove until the car broke down in a storm, and I walked until I found a light. A barn light on a farm in the middle of nowhere. And I stopped." The room was very quiet. Then it was Voss's turn. The cross-examination was sharp, precise, and ruthless. Voss went after Isabella's credibility with the focused efficiency of a surgeon, cutting here, probing there, looking for the weakness that would unravel the whole fabric. She challenged the timeline. She questioned Isabella's characterization of events. She suggested, repeatedly and in multiple ways, that Isabella's account was colored by resentment, by the influence of outside parties, by the emotional instability that Mr. Ashcroft had been so concerned about. "Ms. Sterling, isn't it true that you have a history of anxiety and depression, and that during periods of acute stress, your perception of events can be significantly distorted?" "I have a history of anxiety, yes. Anxiety that was caused and exacerbated by living under Mr. Ashcroft's control. And my perception is fine. My perception is the reason I'm sitting here." "You mentioned that Mr. Ashcroft recommended a therapist for you. Isn't it possible that his concern for your mental health was genuine?" "He recommended a therapist who reported back to him. I learned that after I left. The therapist, Dr. Maren Hollis, was already consulting with Victor on managing me. That's not concern. That's surveillance." Voss paused. Logan could see her recalculating. The same mechanical adjustment he'd seen in Victor at the gate. The claim about the therapist was new, and it had clearly caught Voss off guard. "Do you have evidence of this alleged arrangement with the therapist?" "I do." Sandra Park stood. "Your Honor, Respondents Exhibit 47. Email correspondence between Dr. Maren Hollis and Mr. Ashcroft, spanning 14 months, in which Dr. Hollis provides detailed summaries of Ms. Sterling's therapy sessions and receives instructions from Mr. Ashcroft regarding therapeutic direction." The courtroom shifted. Behind Voss, one of the junior attorneys started typing furiously on a laptop. Victor's expression didn't change, not visibly, but Logan saw his hand move to the table edge and grip it, the knuckles whitening. Park wasn't finished. "Your Honor, Respondent also calls Claire Novak, former personal assistant to Ms. Sterling." Claire entered from the back of the courtroom. She was smaller than Logan had imagined, mid-30s, brown hair, glasses, the kind of person you'd pass on the street without a second glance. She walked to the witness box with the careful, deliberate steps of someone who'd thought about this moment for 2 years and was determined not to stumble. Her testimony took an hour and 40 minutes. She described the internal culture at the Ashcroft-Sterling household, the monitoring systems, the controlled access, the systematic removal of anyone who questioned Victor's authority. She described meetings where Victor outlined his strategy for consolidating the Sterling assets, using language that Claire had documented in contemporaneous notes. "He called it the architecture," Claire said, echoing what she'd told Isabella on the phone. He used that word specifically. He said the architecture needed to be complete before Isabella turned 35 because that was when certain trust provisions would have given her independent control. He wanted the restructuring finished before she could exercise those rights. And did Ms. Sterling know about these provisions? No, Mr. Ashcroft specifically instructed the legal team not to inform her. He said, and I'm quoting from my notes, "She doesn't need to know what she's entitled to. That's the whole point." The room went silent. Judge Wynn looked at Victor over the top of her glasses. Victor's composure held, but barely. The edges were fraying, the machine showing its seams. Voss tried to discredit Claire on cross, questioned her motives, suggested she'd been terminated for cause, and was seeking revenge. But Claire had the documents. 412 files, date-stamped, internally consistent, corroborated by email metadata that the forensic accountant had verified. They weren't allegations. They were records. And records don't have motives. 2 more witnesses followed Claire. The financial advisor Isabella's father had used, a man named Gerald Pruitt, who'd been pushed out by Victor and replaced with a firm under Victor's control, and a woman named Diana Reeves, Isabella's college roommate, who testified that she'd been contacted by someone from Ashcroft Holdings and warned that maintaining contact with Isabella could result in complications for her own business. "He told me to stay away from my best friend," Diana said, her voice breaking. "He didn't even do it himself. He had someone call me, like I was a problem to be managed." By the afternoon, the case had shifted. Logan could feel it in the room, the way the air moved, the way the judge's questions became more pointed toward Victor's legal team, the way Voss's objections grew more frequent and less effective. The architecture that Victor Ashcroft had spent 4 years building was being dismantled in front of him, piece by piece, by the very people he'd removed from Isabella's life. Victor did not take the stand. His attorneys argued that he wasn't required to, and Judge Wynn didn't compel it, but his absence spoke its own language. The man who controlled every room he walked into had chosen not to walk into this one. The man who always had an answer had decided, for the first time, that silence was safer than speech. Closing arguments were brief. Voss argued that the financial structures were standard, that Victor's involvement was protective, that Isabella's claims were exaggerated by grief and outside influence. She was professional, she was thorough, and she was drowning, and everyone in the room knew it. Sandra Parks stood and said simply, "Your Honor, the evidence shows a systematic, deliberate campaign to isolate Ms. Sterling from her support network, seize control of her inherited assets, and maintain dominance through psychological manipulation and financial coercion. This was not protection. It was not love. It was not partnership. It was architecture, designed, built, and maintained by one person for one purpose: control." Ms. Sterling asked this court to dismantle that architecture and restore what was taken from her. Judge Wynn took 36 hours to issue her ruling, 36 hours during which Logan, Isabella, and Lily drove home, ate spaghetti, fed the horses, and tried to pretend that the rest of their lives wasn't being decided by a woman in a gray courtroom 200 miles away. Lily, who understood almost nothing about what was happening and yet somehow understood exactly what mattered, said at dinner, "I think the judge will be nice. She has the same glasses as Mrs. Patterson." "Different glasses, Bug." Same energy. Logan didn't know what that meant, but Lily said it with such confidence that he chose to take it as a good sign. The call came at 11:14 the next morning. Sandra Parks' voice, controlled but with something vibrating underneath it. The sound of a lawyer who's won something big and is trying to maintain professional decorum about it. Full ruling in Isabella's favor. All of it. Isabella was standing in the kitchen. Logan was at the table. The phone was on speaker between them. Neither of them moved. "The emergency freeze on the trust assets is made permanent pending full restructuring. Victor Ashcroft is removed as co-signer, trustee, and authorized party on all Sterling accounts and entities. The transfer of Sterling Dynamics shares is voided. The court found clear and convincing evidence of financial manipulation, coercive control, and breach of fiduciary duty." Judge Wynn also referred the matter to the State Attorney General's office for potential criminal investigation. Isabella put both hands on the counter and leaned forward, her head dropping between her shoulders. Her body shook once. A single, full-body tremor, like something enormous was passing through her and coming out the other side. "There's more," Park continued. Victor's counterpetition is dismissed with prejudice. The court awarded attorneys' fees and costs to our side, and the protective order has been granted. Victor is prohibited from contacting you directly or through intermediaries. Thank you, Isabella said. Her voice was barely audible. Thank you, Sandra. Thank your witnesses. Claire Novak's testimony was the turning point. Without those documents, we had a strong case. With them, we had an unassailable one. After the call ended, the kitchen was silent. Logan sat at the table, his hands flat on the surface, looking at Isabella. She was still leaning on the counter, her back to him, her shoulders rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths. Isabella. She turned around. Her face was wet. Not dramatic tears, not cinematic weeping, just water on her cheeks, her eyes red, her expression caught somewhere between devastation and relief. The look of someone who'd been carrying a weight so long they'd forgotten what their body felt like without it, and was now discovering that the absence of pain was its own kind of overwhelming. It's over, she said. Not a question, a statement, testing the words, seeing if they held. It's over. She crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and put her arms around him. Not carefully, not tentatively. She just walked into him and held on, her face against his shoulder, her hands gripping the back of his shirt. And Logan, who had not been held by anyone in 5 years, who had trained himself to need nothing from anyone, because needing things was how you got hurt, stood there with this woman's arms around him and felt something break open inside his chest that he'd been keeping sealed since the day Sarah died. He put his arms around her. Awkwardly at first, because he'd forgotten how to do this. The mechanics of it, where to put his hands, how tightly to hold. But then something older than memory took over, some instinct buried beneath the years of solitude, and his arms tightened and his cheek pressed against her hair, and he stood there in the kitchen, holding a woman who was shaking and laughing and crying all at once, and he thought, this is what it feels like to come back to life. They stood like that for a long time, not speaking, just breathing, letting the silence fill with something that wasn't pain for the first time in longer than either of them could remember. When they separated, Isabella wiped her face with the heel of her hand and let out a shaky breath. I need to call Claire. Yeah, you do. And there are 100 things I need to do. The restructuring, the estate, the company, all of it. One thing at a time, she laughed, wet, ragged, real. If you say that one more time, I'm going to have it tattooed on the barn. It would look nice on the barn. Lily came downstairs at that moment. She'd been watching a cartoon, immune to the legal drama unfolding in the kitchen, and saw Isabella's face. Why are you crying? Lily asked, alarmed. I'm happy, Isabella said. Lily considered this. Happy crying is confusing. It really is. Did the judge say nice things? The judge said very nice things. Lily nodded sagely. Same energy as Mrs. Patterson. The weeks that followed were a strange, disorienting kind of beautiful. The legal machinery ground forward, slowly, the way it always did, but now grinding in Isabella's favor. The Sterling Family Trust was restructured under independent oversight. Sterling Dynamics shares were restored to Isabella's sole control. Victor Ashcroft's access to every account, every entity, every piece of the architecture he'd spent years constructing was revoked, and the State Attorney General's office opened a formal investigation into financial fraud and coercive control. Victor himself disappeared from public view. No statements, no press conferences, no countersuits. His attorneys filed the minimum required responses and otherwise went silent. Bridwell said it was a strategy, that Victor was trying to minimize exposure while the criminal investigation was pending. Logan thought it was something simpler. He thought it was the silence of a man who'd finally encountered a wall he couldn't talk his way through. Isabella stayed at the farm, not because she had to. She had resources now, access to everything that had been locked away, the ability to go anywhere in the world and live however she chose. She stayed because she chose to. And the difference between staying because you have no options and staying because you found the one place you want to be, that difference was everything. She hired contractors to repair the barn roof. She paid off the liens, not as charity, not as strategy, but as the logical act of a person who lived on a farm that needed a barn roof and had the means to fix it. Logan fought her on it for 3 days and then gave up which was approximately the same amount of time he'd fought Lily on the name Sparkle before giving up on that too. He was beginning to recognize a pattern. "You have a type," Bridwell told him on the phone. "Stubborn women who know what they want. You're outnumbered and you should accept it." "Thanks, Tom. I'm billing you for this advice." "You're billing me for everything." "That's how it works." The idea for the ranch came from Lily, though she didn't know it. It was a Sunday afternoon in late October. The leaves had turned, golds and reds and deep burning oranges that lit up the hills like the whole landscape was on fire. Logan was fixing the paddock gate, Isabella was grooming Rosie, and Lily was sitting on an overturned bucket, talking to Sparkle through the stall bars. "When you grow up," Lily told the foal, "you're going to help people. Because horses are good at helping. They don't talk, so they just listen. And sometimes listening is the best kind of helping." Isabella stopped brushing. She looked at Logan. He looked at her. "She's 5, he said. "She's right." The conversation that night, after Lily was in bed, was the kind of conversation that changes the shape of a life. They sat on the porch, their porch, though neither of them called it that yet, and Isabella said, "What if we turn this place into something bigger?" "Bigger how?" "A healing ranch. A place where people who've been through trauma, abuse, loss, whatever, can come and work with horses. Equine therapy. We have the land, we have the horses, and we have," she gestured between them, "we have the experience. Both of us know what it feels like to carry something too heavy, and we both know what it feels like to find a place where you can set it down." Logan leaned back in the chair and looked at the stars. The same stars he'd been looking at for 5 years, sitting in this same chair, on this same porch, feeling the same solitude that had become his default setting. But the solitude was different now, lighter, shared. "It's a big project," he said. "I know. It would take money, real money, not just fixing the barn roof. I have real money, more than I'll ever need, and I can't think of a better use for it than this. People would come here, to this place, middle of nowhere, gravel roads, no cell signal half the time. That's exactly why they'd come here. Because it's quiet. Because there's nothing to perform for. Because the horses don't care who you were before. They only care who you are right now." He thought about it. He thought about the farm the way it was, held together by stubbornness and baling wire. And he thought about the farm the way it could be, expanded, purposeful, alive with people who needed what this place had always given him, a reason to get up, a rhythm to follow, the simple grounding reality of an animal that needed to be fed, and a fence that needed to be fixed, and a day that was going to happen whether you were ready for it or not. "We'd need staff," he said. "A therapist, at least one, certified in equine-assisted therapy, and more horses, and facilities, barns, cabins, meeting spaces. I know a good forensic accountant who owes me a favor. He can help set up the financials. And we'd need a name." Isabella smiled. "I have an idea about that." They called it Sterling Acres, not after Isabella's family name, though that's where it came from, but after the word itself. Sterling, strong, genuine, worth something. The construction took 4 months. Isabella oversaw it with the same focused intensity she'd brought to the legal case, making phone calls, reviewing plans, negotiating with contractors. Logan handled the practical side, the land clearing, the fence building, the livestock management. They argued about everything: the placement of the new barn, the design of the cabins, the type of fencing, the color of the welcome sign. "Green," Isabella said. "Brown," Logan said. "Green stands out. Brown blends in. People aren't coming here for a billboard. They're coming here to disappear for a while." "Brown is boring. Brown is honest." They compromised on dark green with brown trim, which satisfied neither of them and therefore was probably the right choice. Lily appointed herself creative director. She drew a logo for Sterling Acres, a horse with comically long legs standing under a tree, and insisted it be used on all official materials. Isabella had it professionally redrawn, preserving the essential spirit of Lily's design while making it slightly less likely to frighten potential visitors. "The legs are important," Lily said when she saw the redesign. "Long legs mean the horse is fast and cool." "The legs are there," Isabella assured her, "just slightly more proportional." "Proportional is boring." You sound like your father. Gail came by one afternoon as the first cabin was going up, framing crews hammering away in the back field. She stood in the driveway with her arms crossed, watching the construction, and then looked at Logan with the particular expression of a neighbor who's been watching your life unfold for 5 years and has been waiting for this specific chapter. About time, she said. About time for what? About time you stopped surviving and started living. I've been watching you go through the motions since Sarah died, Logan. Getting up, doing this work, taking care of Lily, keeping the place running, and that's fine. That kept you alive. But this, she nodded toward the construction. This is different. This is you building something that matters. Isabella's building it. Don't finish that sentence. You're not just anything. You're the reason she's here. You're the reason that girl had a safe place to land when the world was falling apart. Don't diminish that. He didn't know what to say, so he said the thing he always said when he didn't know what to say. You want some coffee? That terrible instant stuff? No, thank you. We actually have a real coffee maker now. Isabella bought one. Gail's eyebrows rose. Well then, things really have changed. Sterling Acres opened in March, 6 months after the court ruling. The first group was small, 4 people, referred through a network of therapists and social workers that Isabella had spent months building. They arrived on a Tuesday afternoon carrying duffel bags and guarded expressions, and the particular wariness of people who'd been through enough to know that good things were usually the setup for bad ones. Logan met them at the gate. Not because it was his job. There was staff for that now, a small team including a licensed equine therapist named Miriam Vasquez, and 2 ranch hands who actually knew what they were doing. But Logan wanted to be there. He wanted to stand at the gate and hold it open, the way he'd held it open on a rainy night when a soaked, frightened woman had appeared out of the dark. The work was slow and unglamorous. Mornings in the barn, afternoons in the ring, evenings around a table in the common room talking about things that were hard to talk about. The horses did what horses do. They stood still when people needed something to lean on. They moved when people needed to move. They paid attention without judgment. Sparkle, now a year old and growing fast, had a particular talent for standing beside nervous newcomers and waiting with a patience that would have been remarkable in a much older animal. She gets it from her mother, Logan told Isabella one evening, watching Sparkle stand beside a woman who'd barely spoken all week, the woman's hand resting on the filly's neck, both of them silent and still. She gets it from this place, Isabella said. 1 year after the court ruling, on a cool October evening with the leaves turning and the sky the color of bruised peaches, Logan and Isabella sat on the porch the way they did most evenings. Lily was inside, asleep, the walkie-talkie on her nightstand even though she didn't need it anymore. Hadn't needed it in months. Sparkle was in the barn with Dutch. The new cabins stood in the back field, warm light in their windows. Somewhere in one of them, someone who'd come to Sterling Acres carrying something heavy was starting to set it down. 1 year, Isabella said. 1 year. Do you remember what you said to me that first night? In the kitchen, when I told you about Victor? I said a lot of things that first night. Most of them were probably awkward. You said, nobody's coming through that gate tonight without me knowing about it. And I thought, who is this man? Who says that to a stranger? Someone who'd been waiting to say it for a long time. I just didn't know it until you showed up. She reached over and took his hand. Not dramatically, not with any particular ceremony, just reached across the space between the 2 chairs, the chairs that had once been his and Sarah's and were now his and Isabella's, and laced her fingers through his. His hand was rough and scarred and calloused from work. Hers was smoother than it used to be, but no longer the hands of a woman who'd never touched a pitchfork. They fit together imperfectly, the way real things do. I spent years believing that my worth was measured in what I owned, she said. The company, the estate, the houses, the accounts, billions of dollars, and none of it kept me safe. None of it made me happy. None of it told me who I was. She squeezed his hand. A 5-year-old with a walkie-talkie told me more about what matters in one breakfast than 4 years of boardrooms ever did. Lily would be thrilled to hear that. She'd also remind you that horses can swim. Horses can swim. Madison was wrong. Madison was definitely wrong. They sat there as the dark settled in, as the stars appeared one by one the way they always did. Not all at once, not with fanfare, but gradually, steadily, the way the best things in life tend to arrive. The farm stretched around them, quiet and alive, holding everything it had become: a home, a refuge, a place where broken things were allowed to heal at their own pace. And here is the thing about this story, the part that matters, the part that stays with you after the details fade. It's not about a billionaire finding happiness on a farm. It's not about a court case or a legal victory or a bad man getting what he deserved. It's about doors. Every person who's ever been trapped by abuse, by grief, by circumstance, by the slow accumulation of days lived under someone else's control, knows what it feels like to stand on the other side of a closed door, trying to decide if it's worth the risk of knocking. The fear isn't just about what's behind the door. It's about whether anyone will answer. It's about whether the person on the other side will look at you and see a complication, a burden, a problem to be solved, or whether they'll see a human being who needs more than anything else in the world to be let in. Logan Mercer wasn't a hero. He was a tired, broke, grieving man who happened to be checking on a horse when a woman appeared at his gate. He didn't have money or lawyers or power. He had a pitchfork, a recliner, and a 5-year-old who believed that the right name for a baby horse was Sparkle. And when the moment came, when the knock sounded, he opened the door. That's all any of us can do. We can't fix the storm. We can't guarantee the outcome. We can't promise that standing up for someone won't cost us something, because it will. It always will. And anyone who says otherwise has never actually done it. But we can open the gate. We can make the coffee. We can say, "You're safe here," and mean it. Isabella Sterling had everything money could buy, and none of what money couldn't. Logan Mercer had nothing money could buy, and all of what money couldn't. Somewhere between those two truths, in a kitchen with crayons on the table and a photo on the fridge and a horse in the barn, about to become a mother, they found the thing that neither of them had been looking for. Not a fairy tale. Fairy tales are clean and perfect, and this was neither. This was messy and exhausting and full of arguments about fence paint and legal briefs and whether instant coffee was acceptable in a civilized household. This was a 5-year-old who refused to accept proportional horse legs. This was a barn that still smelled like manure no matter how many times you cleaned it. This was two people learning, day by day, that love isn't a feeling. It's a decision you make every morning when you get up and choose to stay. The autumn sky darkened above Sterling Acres, and the porch light glowed warm against the night, and somewhere in the barn, Sparkle shifted in her sleep, dreaming whatever horses dream. And on the porch, two people sat together in chairs that creaked, holding hands that didn't match, watching a sky full of stars that didn't care about any of it. And that was enough. Not perfect, not complete, not wrapped in a bow, just enough. The way the best things always are.